April 23rd, 2020. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of That's What G Said podcast. We got a lot on our plate today. Going to talk some NFL draft news. The latest news is the draft is coming up just later this evening as when this is recorded. And so if you want to get a full draft preview. Remember last week we did a full draft preview. We went through like a round one mock. We went team by team, who they may look to select in the first round. We went through each team's needs. So if you want to check that out, make sure to give that a look from last week where we go through everything you need to know for the NFL draft. And then we're going to get into an interview with Mike Joyce from TVG. And we're not going to be talking a whole lot about horse racing. We are going to talk about the documentary, The Last Dance, the Bulls Michael Jordan documentary that was on ESPN last weekend. Mike is from Chicago. He grew up rooting for the Bulls. This was literally his era of basketball, so he remembers all of this. He's a really cool person to talk to about it. So make sure to listen into that conversation. We're going to talk some horse racing, Gulfstream and Oaklawn Thursday, Gulfstream and Oaklawn Friday, and then we close things out with a little wrestling talk. And going to be old school wrestling with Jason Beem and Danny Kovoloff. We're going to recap Wrestlemania 4, the tournament. Macho Man Randy Savage gets the win. Bobby the Brain Heenan all over the show. Jimmy Hart, some of those great managers. We got Gorilla and Jesse at the commentary booth. Hogan and Andre throughout the tournament. A lot of fun recapping that. Let's get right into NFL draft news. So, if you missed out, Rob Gronkowski, former Patriot, who did not play last year, who was the host of Wrestlemania, and is the current WWE 24/7 champion, he was traded to Tampa, to the Bucs, with a 7th-round pick, and the Patriots get back a 4th-round pick. So, it's Tom Brady and Gronk reunited in Tampa. So, the question that we'll all ask, how healthy is Gronk? He's always had knee issues, back issues, big guy. How focused is he? Got a lot of other things that he's been involved in. Is he in, football shape? Is he going to be able to get into the type of shape he needs to be successful, to be competitive? Last we saw him in 2018, he had 682 yards receiving and 3 touchdowns. He played in 13 games, 47 receptions. He's, gone for over 1,000 yards 4 times in his career. Had some, double-digit touchdown years 5 times. We know what his ceiling is, but how much of that guy is still there? Man, I'll tell you, it was a crazy NFL offseason, though. So much movement. So, that's not really NFL draft news, but it's definitely NFL news leading up to the draft. Another signing, the Colts signed tight end Trey Burton. He was really highly projected over the last couple of years. Was supposed to be someone coming to Chicago that folks thought were going to take the next step. He had 54 receptions for 569 yards and 6 touchdowns in 2018, but he was not really on the field much last year. Only able to catch 14 balls for a total of 84 yards. So, can the Colts get out of him what many folks thought was there a few years ago? He was like a hot fantasy name. A lot of people were talking to him about like a breakout tight end in 2018. The Redskins are looking into trading their offensive lineman Trent Williams. They've had problems for a while now, and right before the draft, this could be a good opportunity for the Redskins to give a high-quality offensive lineman to a team in need, and for Washington to be able to gain an asset here before the draft. And then we get all these rumors, right? The Dolphins are looking to trade up to get an offensive lineman. That's the rumor, offensive tackle. Possibly a swap with the Giants, because the Giants are looking to maybe move down a little bit. So are the Cardinals. The Giants are at pick 4, Dolphins are at pick 5, so Dolphins may be moving up a little bit, Giants may be moving down, perhaps they swap. Cardinals wanting to maybe move down from the 8th pick to stack a little bit more draft capital. They don't have a second-round pick, so they could maybe add a couple picks if they trade down. The Panthers, they're also thinking about trading down. The Detroit Lions, they're willing to entertain trade offers for the number 3 pick. And the Falcons, they're looking to move into the top 10, maybe to get a top-level cornerback or offensive tackle. Falcons are number 16. And the Browns, they're number 10. They could trade down a little bit and gain more assets. So we're getting a lot of these rumors now within 24 hours of the NFL draft. I'm excited, especially with nothing going on, and with the way this draft is going to be, with a virtual draft, everything being done on Zoom, Skype, conferences, and so going to be a different NFL draft this year. Okay, let's get on over to our first interview on this show. It's going to be with Mike Joyce from TVG. We catch up with Mike a little bit at the beginning, and then we jump on into talking about the first 2 episodes of The Last Dance, the documentary about the Chicago Bulls, Michael Jordan, and that 1997-1998 final season where they were all together. And Mike lived it. He was in it. Kick back and enjoy this interview. We talk a little basketball in that documentary. It's pretty crazy to think that this next guest actually hasn't been on That's What G Said. Talked to him before on the Mike Abadir show, and I worked with Mike Joyce for, I think, 5 years over at TVG. Very happy to be talking to Mike Joyce. And Mike, right when I bring you on, I got to give you a little balls washing right away. That was a great pick in the Rainbow Six last week with your ballsy single there. You just couldn't get the ticket put together, but hell of a job, man.
Yeah, so how about this? I singled a horse that was 15-1 morning line. I couldn't get the 7-2 shot into it, and I went 4 of 6. Who cares about going 4 of 6? But I couldn't get the 7-2 shot, and the other horse I missed was the one that Gabby gave out. Same scenario, 15-1 morning line. It was that Roger Atfield horse, 3rd-time U.S. First 2 starts in the States didn't look that great on paper, but it was definitely like a replay horse. So yeah, it was one of those. I was close.
Bobbing and weaving.
I had 2 of the 3 hardest horses to have in the Rainbow Six, and then I missed kind of. But you know what the thing is? I could have had the Atfield horse that Gabby gave out.
Sure.
The horse that beat me, I was 3 deep in that race. The horse was 7-2 or 90. I think it was 7-2. And I'm like, unless I bought this race, I never would have had the horse. So I can't really get that mad. It's
you don't feel as pissed off about it because it wasn't like one that you just decided to cut out because you wanted to make a ticket a little cheaper or anything like that.
I didn't like the horse.
Yeah.
I didn't like him at all.
It's going to happen. And those are the easier ones to swallow. It was like, hey, you know what? You had a pretty good opinion throughout most of the day, but it's like, I just wouldn't have got there. That one's a little easier.
And I don't play at pick 5 and pick 4s as much as I used to. I mean, you were at TBD back in the day.
Yeah.
It was such a bad habit. All of us, the only thing we would play was pick 4, pick 5, pick 6. That was it. And now I've really tailored my play to be more. I bet to win, actually, if you can imagine that. It's crazy. This crazy exotic wager doing is a win bet. And then I play doubles and pick 3s. And my brother and I have always we always talk about doing it, but then I really started doing it. I'm like, it makes way more sense. Instead of playing a pick 4 for $96 or something like that, I'll play a pick 3 with 6 combinations, but I'll punch it 10 times or I'll punch it 20 times.
Absolutely.
And your hit rate is way higher and you're just in a way better shape. And then same thing with doubles, right? Instead of spending, $48 on a pick 3, I'll do 2x1 in a double and punch it 40 times. You know what I mean? And that it's just a way better way to go. It's just a way better way to go.
That was, when I started doing that again this year because I was doing a little bit of work with Sam Houston. I was covering some of their races for the podcast here, and they've got that 15, 12, I think 12% takeout on everything, all of their rolling exotics. So you can play a double and a pick 3, just like you're saying, and not feel because that's kind of what happens now is with those low takeout pick 5s, we kind of feel baited. You want to play what's going to give you a better return on your investment. So you feel a little more baited to play into those pools. And it's nice when you get the opportunity to play it into a place like how Sam Houston was, where you can just fire away on anything, because that's always where my dad did his best with the rolling pick 3s, and he'd hit it 10 times. He'd play a 2x2x2 pick 3, chuck the chalks out, and he hit it 10 times, and you hit the pick 3 for $250, and you just made $2,500.
Well, and don't forget that what the low takeouts do, everyone gets all, oh, the low takeout and the return is so much higher. But you have to realize in 2020, the reason that the returns are higher on a low takeout are totally different. When you have a 15 or 12% takeout, you don't have the pools being flooded by the computer bettors.
Yes.
Because those computer bettors, that's why the pick 4 is kind of a dead wager anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Because the computer bettors are just buying up all these combinations and multiple times, and they're flooding the pool. So when it comes even semi-logically, the return sucks because they're playing for a rebate. Like, they're going to do that in a pool where the takeout's 22%.
Yep.
Because they're getting 7% back. But if they're going into a pool where the takeout's 15%, they're not going to get the rebate on it. The tracks aren't going to give it to them. So you're avoiding that kind of watering down of the value in the pools. So never forget that when you see, every time you see a 12% or a 15% takeout, you just got to draw a huge circle around that wager and make sure that, you're not leaving yourself out of, a shake that's way more friendlier to the individual medium to small size gambler.
So, how the hell are you doing right now with everything going on? Like, you got a new baby there. How are you and your family dealing with all the virus stuff?
It's stressful. I'm not going to lie. And I've been doing a podcast for TVG, and I had, Brittany and Doug O'Neill on 2 of the last 3 episodes. And they're the most positive people on the planet. Doug O'Neill, you can walk up to it. The world could literally be crumbling. He's like, hey, this rock's pretty steady. Hey,
what's up, buddy? Hey, give you a big hug and slap you. Oh, he's so great.
Yeah, you feel great about it. You're like, yeah, you're right. This rock's great. Everything else is falling apart. But and Brittany she'll admit it. She said she's all sunshine and puppy dogs. I am the exact opposite of that. Right? I'm a cynic. Yeah. I think everything's worse. And there's a part of me that I hate all like the we need a feel-good story. I'm like, what are you talking about? Feel-good? It's terrible. We're in a pandemic. Like, this is awful. Everyone's like, we're in this together. I'm like, no, we're not. This is the exact opposite of being together.
We're literally alone.
Yeah, we're all alone. What are you talking? Nobody's in this together. If you're in it together, you're doing it wrong. Like, what are you talking about? And everyone's like, oh, there's always, people who are always looking for that silver lining. I'm like, you're cracked. This is awful. Like, stop. Yeah. Shut up. I hate it. Like, and I feel like there's a bunch of people like me out there that are so sick of all the feel-good stories. I'm like, I don't want to feel good. This is terrible. Like, when it's over, we can feel good. But, like, this is terrible. I'm allowed to feel terrible. Leave me alone. So, yeah.
And me too. We know that I don't have the strongest immune system in the world, so I'm just steering clear of everybody. Like, I don't want to go anywhere out with the crazies. Like, I got a new baby here too. I'm just minding my own business. That's what's great about and that kind of transitions to the next point. We're lucky to be living in an era right now doing what we do where we're able to still do it. Like, I can do every show and everything that I do from home. And TBG, I got to give you credit. I got to applaud, and I'll be the first, when I left TBG a few years ago, I'll be the first, I will applaud TBG when they do things that I like. And when they don't, I'll be the first to say, I don't like that, or that wasn't this, or that was, you guys have been doing a great job, man. We have the ability with the technology, and what's fun with seeing everybody from home, it kind of adds a different personality to the show, right? You get to see everybody with their, Caleb's got the cat there, and Dave's doing the stuff with Sophie now, and everybody's got their little setup. It's a little bit different. It kind of gives you a little glimpse into their world. You guys have been doing a really good job. I'm sure technically it was a little goofy at first, but how has it been different for you, working alone at home?
First of all, you forgot about the goats. Matt has all those goats on the hill behind him. Yeah, the goats are really, to me, the highlight of everyone's home life. Matt has an entire goat herd eating the mountain behind his house. Who knew? So it's a little different because everything has, and you've done, plenty of shows where you have someone on remote and you're back in the studio, or there's a delay. And it can be that awkward moment in the double box where, did they talk? Are they done talking? Do I jump in? There's kind of that moment. So everything's like that because everyone's on a remote location. And most of us are on live view cameras, right, which are basically, network caliber, high definition cameras to broadcast with. But then some of us are on Skype. And so everything is kind of a mishmash technically. And then the way they've got it set up behind the scenes, and I know a lot of people don't get, exposed to how television really is made. But, TVG, we have a $20 million studio that has all the bells and whistles you could possibly want, and everyone's located right there. Well, everyone's gone. Nobody can be in the studio. They have 5 people in there. So the technical director who's punching the buttons is at home. The producer is at home. The director is at home, and they're all in different places. There's just a handful of people in the building, and it's amazing to me that everyone's making these shows work.
It's coming together. It's impressive.
Yeah, it's
really
crazy that it really actually works. I'm like, how?
I mean, like, we saw the NBA try to do that, like, that horse thing, and that was awful. I mean, that was atrocious. I don't know if you caught that at all. I mean, it was bad. It was like, this doesn't seem, obviously, like you said, no matter what, it would be better if it was in the studio and everybody was there. But it doesn't seem like that much of a drop off from what we as a fan want and why we turn TVG on, to hear from you guys, to hear some analysis, to get set up for the races.
Well, it actually makes me feel good about myself because, and be it back to me being a cynic, I don't think that anybody that does like my job or your job, I don't think any of us are any good, right? I think we're all kind of faking it. I think there's maybe one or two people that I think are actually really good. It's like Nick Luck and Todd Schrupp, and that's about it. Like the rest of us, like, screw it. We're all kind of faking it. Like there's not really much to it. But watching the NBA stuff, the horse and all the stuff they have going on makes me realize I'm like, oh no, actually there are people that are worse than me, because my fear was you could always just take some athlete. I always said my proof that we weren't any good. I go, look at all these athletes. They pluck off the court, off the field of play with no training, and they just slap them in front of the camera, and they win 20 Emmys. I'm like, clearly this isn't like a really high caliber skill here. Anybody can do this.
Talent is a crazy word, right?
Yeah, it's completely misapplied in our sense. But now we're getting to see all these other. I'm like, oh, okay, that guy doesn't have a future.
Yeah.
You better save that round ball money, buddy, because they're not going to be knocking down your door to broadcast later. So it made me feel good about myself. But I will say this: the acceptable level of what goes on the air has gotten really low. So major networks have gone to people Skyping in and FaceTiming in, and TVG basically hasn't. We have a handful of people Skyping, but most of our talent have cameras.
Yeah.
And it makes a difference. It makes a huge difference. How it looks is important. So thank you for that comment. But I am really impressed with how they got it all together, and like all the technical crew that and the engineers that had to just pull double time and figure all this stuff out. It's pretty amazing.
Okay, so I got a couple more things we got to catch up on with you because it's been a while. Tell everybody about the new baby. What's going on with the little man?
So I'm actually pushing him in a stroller right now. If I sound out of breath, because I am.
That's great.
Yeah, so Luke Connor, he's actually 10 months old now.
Nice.
He was born June 15th last year. He's my third. I've got 2 teenagers and a 10-month-old. So I didn't plan this out very well.
Yeah.
He's good. He's happy and healthy, and thankfully the pandemic seems to be sparing children, and the younger you are, the less likely you are to have any serious complications from it. So that gives us a little bit of peace of mind, but it's hard not to, as you know, you have a new one as well. It's hard not to be overly protective of your child in this instance.
Yes.
Because you throw statistics and numbers right out the window. It's like if anything happens to your child, you're devastated. So you can't, you're so protective. So it does add a little more stress, more so for my wife than me. And
selfishly for like you and I'm glad that we, my son's now 5.5 months, and I'm glad that this isn't going on while we're having the kids. That would make it even more scary for me, like being at the hospital, being around all that. Like, it's kind of nice that we kind of got that out of the way, and we're at least able to be back home and taking care of them.
How about my nephew's wife is expecting? I think he's expecting in July, and they live on the Lower East Side of Manhattan.
Oh my goodness!
So that's really
right in the
stressful.
middle of everything.
Sorry, I'm getting attacked by a wild pack of dogs here. But yeah, it is stressful. But the other thing that's been pretty stressful for me is I haven't seen the teenagers for a month, because when all this hit, they were with their mom, and we decided not to have them go back and forth. So it's been 4 weeks since I've seen Sammy and Declan. The good news is there's teenagers, so who the hell wants to see them anyway?
I was gonna say they don't care about you right now, anyways. But at least you may be able to like FaceTime them here and there and say hello. But it's just definitely not the same. That's a bummer. So did the baby spark the toupee hair, or what was the spark of the toupee?
So I was really tired of my hairstyle, because when my hair gets too long, I kind of have like this like spiky, messy hairstyle. And when it gets too long, I feel like I look like the old man who's trying to look young. I just feel like it's too youthful of a hairstyle. So I wanted something with like a part, but then there's like this transition. Okay. And so there's no easy way to do the transition, especially when you're on TV every day. So, the good thing about me is I have no shame. So I'm just like, all right, screw it. Let's just grow it out. Let's just figure this out. So I started combing it over one day, and I looked in the mirror. I'm like, holy crap, I look like I'm wearing Marv Albert's toupee. I was like, this is awesome. So most people are embarrassed, like, oh, I got to do something. For me, I'm like, oh, this is great. And then my wife thought it was hideous. And I'm like, well, that was the worst thing you could have told me. I'm going to keep going with this.
Yeah, this is even better.
So I started doing this like bad comb, like bad part, like, you know, like late 70s toupee hairstyle. And I was like hairspraying it in place. And it looked like a toupee. So I started joking and calling it my toupee. And it's amazing. I would say 50% of my followers on social media think it's really a toupee.
Yeah.
I mean, it is like, it's, and like now I've gone, I've kind of bridged that gap and I've gotten closer to a hairstyle I want, although I can't really get a haircut. My wife's just taking the clippers to the side and the back. And even still, people are like, when are you going to get rid of that toupee? I'm like, oh my God, like they really, like people can't, like they can't believe it. No. So, yeah, so it's one of those things. It was kind of an Andy Kaufman moment, like a joke I only found funny.
And you just got to keep running with it. You just got to run it into the damn ground, right?
Yeah, just keep rolling with it, yeah.
So you had mentioned, too, that you're a little cynical, and I think a lot of people that know you probably know TVG's Mike Joyce, who's, you know, a smart-ass, funny guy on there a lot of the time. But I got to kiss your butt a little bit here, because I don't think a lot of people know that don't know our relationship. And when I was at TVG, when I was coming up and I got hired as a producer's assistant, you were like one of my biggest fans. You were someone who I will never forget, was always on my side. You were very, like, which is funny. You're a cynical guy, but you were never that way with me. You were always, like, really helpful with me, to the producers. You were always, like, singing my praises. In fact, you brought me in to work on a radio show with you when we had only known each other for a few months. It was called The Vig, and that was actually, I think, when I saw you working on that show with you, that was where, like, my respect level for you grew the most, because you literally produced our show. You did the entire rundown. You set everything up. We would get to Angel Anaheim Stadium on I think it was Sunday mornings, when we'd have that show at like 7 a.m, and it would be an hour. We'd cover football games. You would have everything done. You got the sponsors and the money that was able to get the show produced. I mean, it was incredible, and you always were on my side. You always stuck up for me. You know, and I was thinking about this the other day. The Vig was just like a few years too early, right? That would have been perfect as a podcast nowadays.
We were way ahead of our time, and I want to bring it back, but I'm so goddamn busy right now. But no, first of all, you did the first episode getting with with a spike in your arm, getting chemo in the hospital. Yeah, like our first episode was your first round of chemo, I think.
Yep, you came and visited me in Temple City before, like, and we talked about the show like the week before. Even whenever I even went into the hospital, my family, you were there with my family and stuff too. So I mean, just a little ass kissing I had to do, because we have fun and we give each other shit a lot. But you know what? You were definitely someone, especially when I was going through a hard time, and then even afterwards, when I was back at TVG, just doing my reporting, working the shows, like, you were always telling them, oh yeah, Gino can do that, he can do that. Like, you definitely were someone who helped me move along. So I wanted to publicly kiss your butt a little bit for that.
Well, you did a good job, and we were always like, I always loved when like people would give you, and it wasn't that long ago that I was the young. I'm 42 now, but I used to be the young guy trying to make his way in the world. But I always, like, everyone was always very critical, right, in horse racing. So I mean, like, let's be honest, we're an industry full of pricks, right? Like, everybody's we love to just tear people down and, you know, and assume the worst. And people would always get on the young people, right? So I would be covering it, and people wouldn't do interviews for me, and people wouldn't.
Same type of thing, yeah.
Yeah, and they would do the same thing. I'm like, yeah, like, I always thought it was great. I was like, no, let's alienate young talent in horse racing. Here's people that love the game. They're young, they're enthusiastic, they're energetic, they're trying to. Let's make sure we make them feel as uncomfortable as possible, and drive them out with the most speed available to us. Like, it was always, to me, like, it kind of, you have to have a little bit of a chip on your shoulder, because it is a hard industry to get some respect. People just they just don't want to accept you. So I think because of that, that's why I always saw a little bit of that same struggle that I had to go through with you. So I kind of felt like it was a little personal. It was kind of first person for me.
I appreciate it, man. It was a lot of positivity for me. I was always like, oh yeah, because I was almost point I looked up to you and Matt and like Todd. You know, you were guys I used to watch before. So it was one of those things, like, getting to work with you and then becoming good friends with you was just one of those things that you're like, wow. You look back on after, it's like, I used to watch those guys and now we're buddies. We shoot each other texts anytime here and there. So just thanks again, man. I probably wouldn't even be like here doing what I am without the support of you and people like you who are kind of helping me out along the way. So enough ass kissing. Let's get to the reason why I wanted to talk with you a little bit. there was the documentary that just came out, The Last Dance, all about the Bulls' final season together, that 97-98 season. So, okay, for some of the folks that wouldn't know, like, why would I be talking to you about this? Set it up a little bit.
Well, I grew up in Chicago, and my dad was a diehard Celtics fan, actually, for a number of reasons. One was because he went to Holy Cross at the same time Bob Cousy did. And two, because one of his best friends, a guy he worked with when he was at Madison Square Garden, was Alan Cohen, who owned the Celtics during the Larry Bird, Kevin McHale run in the 80s. And as much as I wanted to like the Celtics, after the draft in '84 and the Chicago Bulls took Michael Jordan, I was 7, 8, 9 years old, living in Chicago, and that was it. Like there was no changing my mind. It's like you were sucked in. Like it was a vortex, and I had the privilege of rooting for the greatest athlete of our generation and probably of all time. So I was always a huge Jordan fan, Bulls fan. And then my time, the funny thing about watching this documentary to me is that, and you're starting to get older now, so you'll realize how true this is. I read somewhere that 75% of all the memories you have in your life, you make before you're 25.
Yeah.
So 75% of everything in your memory bank happened in the first 25 years of your life. And you got to think the first 10 years, you don't remember anything. So it's really just that 15 years from like 10 years old to 25 where everything, like most of your memories come from.
And this is for you.
Yeah. So watching this documentary isn't like, oh, we're going back 25 years or 22 years. This is like happened yesterday to me, right? These are like, oh yeah, like this is like the most easily accessible memories for me were these Bulls teams. And, the second three-peat, especially because when I was in college and, I was just following it really closely. I was going to bars a lot, watching all the games, and I was at the 97 finals. I was actually at the flu game.
Wow. Yeah,
in Salt Lake City. So I'll give you a little tangent here, little story. So my brother Eugene, who's my only other brother in racing. There's 13 of us, but he's the only other one in racing, and he and I have always been really tight. So I was 20 in 97 or 19, about to be 20. My brother Eugene is the kind of guy who is like, he's just a force of personality unlike anything you've ever seen in your life. And a buddy of his who used to work for my dad, this guy Tom Finch, was just as much of a hustler as they come. And he was really tight with Michael's inner circle. And he had, back in the day, they had these giant screens like you see on the infield of Santa Anita and Gulfstream now. Well, they didn't have those. They had like 2 of them in the world. They were called Sony Trinitrons. And they were like 50 feet, and they were on a semi-trailer. Well, he owned 2 of them. So at the NBA Finals, like he was the vendor they contracted to put the Sony Trinitrons like in the parking lot outside the Delta Center in Utah, outside the United Center in Chicago. And he was like, "Hey, Gino, like come down. I got you set up." So at that time, my brother Eugene, he's got Tom Finch there. Another good friend of his is John Ruane, who's like VP of Broadcast Ops for NBC Sports at the time, and he's he's there, for the finals. And so the first night, I think the flu game was game 4 or game 5. Game 4 the night before, because they were 3, 4, and 5 were in Utah. Game 4 the night before, they took my dad to the game. And so my dad goes, they have press passes hanging out in the press box. And Peter Vesey recognizes my dad. One, because they both went to Regis High School. Peter Vesey about 10, 12 years behind my dad. And then 2, because he used to work for the New York Post, New York Times, so one of those 2. And my dad was, the senior vice president of Madison Square Garden. So my dad was running the Garden, and he was running the Rangers and all the concerts and all the subsidiary racetracks. So he knew who my dad was from those days. He's like, "What the hell are you doing here?" So after that, we all had dinner like in Salt Lake, at a restaurant in Salt Lake. It was like my dad, my brother, John Ruane, Peter Vesey. I'm like, some snot-nosed 19-year-old kid with a ponytail. And then the next night, they're like, "All right, Mike, you get to go to the game this night." I'm like, "All right, cool." So I got to go there. So Eugene and I drive up there. No press passes, right? Just nothing. No tickets, nothing. Like, how the hell are we going to get in? So my brother Eugene has a cell phone, and this is like
Zach Morris cell phone almost, right? Yeah.
Right. So it had the people who had cell phones were like Secret Service police and James Bond, and that was it. Right? Nobody had cell phones back then, and it was like this big giant brick phone. So he walks up. I don't even think the goddamn thing had batteries. Like, he didn't even have a number. He's just like walking up. So he walks up and he starts acting. He was a classically trained actor in his youth. He studied at Juilliard in musical theater. So he's very convincing when he pulls off crap like this. So he starts talking into the cell phone. He goes, look for the most cops huddled in a bunch. I'm like, what? So we're walking around and there's people sitting in line. We're kind of walking around the back of the Delta Center. There's a chain link fence. There's 15 cops standing at it. He's like, that's where we're going. He's like, just don't say a word. And he goes, and hold my briefcase. I'm like, all right. So I'm holding his briefcase. He's on the phone talking. And he's like, yeah, okay. I'm trying to, all right, man, I don't know where the hell I'm going. Hang on. And he puts the phone against his chest and he looks and goes, hey, come here. And the cop comes over. He goes, I need to get to the NBC truck right now. And the cop's like, yeah. And he opens the fence and walks us in. I'm like, are you kidding me? That just happened?
That's amazing.
So we walk in to the Delta Center through the tunnel, through the main tunnel where everybody comes in, where the players walk in. We're walking through the bowels of this arena, and we just walk out onto the floor. And I'm standing on the floor on the Bulls end as Scottie Pippen is doing a layup. I'm like, are you kidding me? We're 5 minutes before tip off. I'm like, how the hell did we get out here? And Eugene's like, hey, Mike, look for Finch. So I'm looking around. Sure enough, 5 rows up behind the one of the benches, Tom Finch stands up, waving his arms. He's like, all right, great. So we walk up there. Finch is like, hey, I only got the one press pass for you, Gino. So, Michael, here's last night. Just wear it backwards. I'm like, where am I going to go? He's like, I don't know. So I was just on my own. I'm
walking around
in the Delta Center. My brother's sitting, courtside with Finchy, and I'm just, okay. So I made myself up to press row, which is kind of high up, but at least I had a place to sit. And I watched the flu game from up there, and you're kind of high up, but you could tell, I didn't know until afterwards that Michael had the flu, and you could kind of hear rumors, but all the different beat writers and whatnot were up there and they're saying he doesn't look right, something's wrong. And then there's rumors flying, but yeah, that was the one NBA finals game I've ever been to in my life was the flu game.
What an incredible memory on that one. Jeez.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. So what I really like about the way the documentary's been done, because this footage has been out there for 25 years now, they've been different people, Bill Simmons was talking about it. He was trying to put a documentary together for the last few years. A lot of different groups have attempted to, but you needed to get the cooperation from Jordan because this wouldn't be the reason why this is so good is because you have Michael Jordan there kind of narrating along with it, and giving his opinion on everything all the way throughout. I really love the way they set this up, Mike, how, it's all based on that last dance, that final season. But what they do is and we've only seen 2 episodes so far. It looks like they're going to, that's the overall theme, but then each episode is going to kind of have its own singular focus. And in episode 1, it was basically, Michael Jordan coming from college to the NBA, the draft, and then we got to see that awesome when he got hurt and then he came back in that awesome series against the Celtics where he almost was able to single-handedly beat them before the Bulls were even the Bulls. I love how it bounces back and forth. I think they do a really good job of that. And so for that first episode, that theme where we kind of saw young Jordan, and we heard about the stories with Dean Smith and the stories with James Worthy was great. He said I was better than him for about 2 weeks, know, and then 2 weeks in, what are some of the things from that first episode, young Jordan moving from Carolina to the Bulls that you really remembered or that stood out to you?
Well, the best part about that episode was the story about going into the hotel room and there was all the hookers and blow everywhere.
The traveling cocaine circus.
That was the best story. That's one I hadn't heard before, right? And it never really dawned on me because the NBA in the late 70s, early 80s, they had a massive drug problem, right?
Yeah.
And I guess it was the death of Len Bias that it took that to kind of clean it up. But I'd never heard that story. And that was the one that just cracked me up. I was like, and you get the idea of just how, and I think we all knew it and it wasn't any new information, but you get the idea of how he was wired from a really early point on. And it's unlike anybody else. So I know that people say these things that, winning is the most important thing. That's great. But he was literally psychotic about it. It's a problem. He has a psychological disorder that if he was not a supremely gifted athlete, he'd be in a straitjacket.
Oh, you're right. You're absolutely right.
So for a 20, when I know how I would handle it. If I was a 20-year-old kid and I walked into a hotel room with hookers and blow, the last thing I'm going to say is, "Hey, I'm out of here, guys.
I'm out of here."
Yeah, like that's the last response I would have ever. I don't even think it would have come to my head. And for him, he's like, "No, I'm not going to do this." And he just, was just like, "All right, I'm going to buckle down and get better." Like he just wanted to get better as fast as he could, and he wanted to win. And you just get the first episode, they do a good job of letting you realize, it was different. It wasn't like LeBron. It wasn't like Kobe. It wasn't like Hakeem or Kareem or Wilt it was purely he was the most competitive human that has ever walked the planet. And it didn't matter. He couldn't care about draft picks or rebuilding or any of that. He just wanted to win. He didn't care how it happened. He wanted to win. And if it wasn't, if he needed to take over a game, so be it. Like he didn't care. And I think that, I don't know why. I mean, I guess I understand why he wouldn't want his portrayal as it was in this to come out and maybe reflect poorly on him. But I think we all knew that, right? Like it's not 96, 97 anymore where everyone's like super nice. I mean, he had the press wrapped around his finger because if you were a sports writer in the 90s, you needed access to Michael Jordan. And if you didn't get it, you had no job. Yeah, you had no job. So he controlled the press. It was totally different. This is pre-social media. The hyenas couldn't circle on him. So I think he's just so used to controlling his image that he was worried about it coming out. But like now we all know it. We all know what he was like. He wasn't a nice guy. You didn't want to, you didn't want to come over and have him over for dinner. You wanted to watch him play basketball because he was going to win at all costs. And it was unique in that he was the most dominant alpha male that has ever stepped foot on a basketball court.
And you kind of hit on something too. He was able to, and I don't want to say like deceive or like pull the wool over their eyes isn't the right word, but what you said, like, I guess maybe manipulate the situation to exactly the way he wanted it, because that's what was needed from the media at that point. Like you needed him, you needed access to Jordan. So he was able to, and then with the sneakers and as he became bigger and bigger and got into the movies and Space Jam and everything, like to America, he was this great, friendly, big smile MJ. But what we know behind closed doors, that's not at all who he was.
No, he was a psychopath. It wasn't enough to beat you. He wanted to eviscerate you, right? And mentally, he wanted to crush you. We even see like how, they say like some of the bench players that he like destroyed their careers, by how hard he went at them in practice. Well, speaking of Bill Simmons, he wrote a great, I don't know if it was in the Book of Basketball or it was just an article he was writing on the 92 Dream Team and what he did to Clyde Drexler. Because what happened going into so basically he was so rough on Clyde Drexler in the Dream Team practices, like he couldn't beat the guy enough. Apparently he got into his head so hard that Drexler, one of the stories is Drexler showed up to practice one day and he brought two left shoes. And instead of like admitting he brought two left shoes and seeing everybody having everybody see him leave the building and get made fun of, he played the whole practice in two left shoes because he didn't want anyone to see it. He didn't want like
ridicule.
He couldn't handle it. And it took Magic and Larry to like pull Michael aside and say, all right, you have to stop. Like you have to stop now. And he had just beaten him in the finals. And what the reason was, the build up to the NBA finals, right? There's two things. One, the Blazers drafted Sam Bowie because they had Clyde Drexler and they thought, well, Michael Jordan's a very similar player to Clyde Drexler, so why would we do that? So that's slight number one. And then number two, the build up to the 92 finals, they try to pit it like, oh, Clyde Drexler, he's almost as good as Jordan. He probably would beat Michael Jordan if he was in a bigger market. Like there was this storyline that, knowing what you know about Michael now, it's like,
slap in the face to him.
Well, it's like taking a baby and dipping it in teriyaki sauce and then hanging it in front of an angry Rottweiler, right? Like what? Like you can't do that. Like you're just gonna go nuts. And so beating Clyde Drexler in the finals wasn't enough for him. He had to humiliate him on the Dream Team. Like that's what he was like. I mean, he was so competitive. He couldn't handle anyone getting a sniff of what he thought was his.
So one of the overarching storylines, and then we'll kind of move into the second episode, which is more Pippen based, but one of the overarching stories is really like Jerry Krause is a bad dude. I mean, it just does not paint him well. I mean, they from just Jordan like blatantly ripping him, like blasting him for being short and fat right to his face. From Pippen, screaming at him from the back of the bus. This guy was not liked, but he's kind of a polarizing figure to discuss because you like him or not, he put this team together.
He's simultaneously two things. He's the greatest GM in the history of Chicago basketball and the worst GM in the history of Chicago basketball.
Right? Yeah.
So he put together two of the greatest teams. I mean, he did it not once, but twice. Because remember, he had to reload in between three-peats, right?
And you know what? People forget about how that team, when Jordan wasn't there, they went to the Eastern Conference Finals. Like, that was still a good team.
Right. That was, I mean, they were, don't forget, they were the phantom call away from going to the finals.
Yeah.
And Scottie Pippen almost took him there. But, think about all the hits he had. He didn't draft Jordan, right? But he drafted Horace Grant. He drafted Scottie Pippen. He traded Oakley for Cartwright. He brought in Steve Kerr. He brought in Craig Hodges. He drafted Stacey King. He drafted B.J. Armstrong. He drafted Tony Kukoc. He brought in Dennis Rodman. I mean, this guy had a string of hits longer than the Beatles. So, feed his ego, and clearly he's got some kind of Napoleonic complex going on. But, feed the ego. He's a two-time executive of the year in the NBA. Probably should have been a seven-time, NBA executive of the year. Right? I mean, he was the greatest GM. I mean, he makes anything that anybody else was doing at the time. I mean, there have been GMs that have had success, but I mean, that string of hits, I don't think anybody came close to it, ever. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And not only is he not getting credit, but he's literally getting psychologically abused on a daily basis by Michael and Scotty. So he wanted to blow up and do it again, but why not? I mean, he probably thought he could. He was like, yes, I mean, his rebuilds, first of all, one of his rebuilds was derailed by Jason Williams, riding his motorcycle into a tree. So that wasn't really his fault. And he made a bad move. He could have rebuilt with Elton Brand and Tyson Chandler, and he ended up trading Brand so he could draft Eddie Curry, which probably wasn't a great move, right? But if he would have had a core of Tyson Chandler, Elton Brand, and Jay Williams, right? That could have been a team that competed for years.
Absolutely.
Yes, so he really only made one bad move in his rebuild, one bad move, and it set him back 10 years. And then the Bulls didn't get back on track until they had the Kirk Heinrich, Ben Gordon, Andres Nocioni teams, right? I mean, it took him, but still, within 10 years, he was back there. So and he died in 2015 or 17 or something like that. So he can't defend himself. So he was a brilliant GM. He just made the worst indefensible decision in the history of sports, which was breaking up the greatest team ever. I mean, that's no matter how you cut it, no matter everything great he did, and he was a scout in baseball and he became a scout in basketball essentially as that GM. No matter how you cut it, everything he did, he was probably the greatest GM of all time. He was the worst GM ever for doing that, and that's going to be his legacy.
Yeah, all of the wins are worth nothing when you're willing, and kind of the ego. That's what we see, right? It's just one of those things where it's and that's the problem with a lot of these guys who succeed and who do really well and who have a lot of money. It's they want the credit. If he was able to just take a step back, who knows how long? Because Scotty still had some years left in the tank, and we saw that Michael wasn't done right then either. Who knows? It's always a what if question to ask. But
the Bill Simmons Ryan Russillo show that I think both of us listened to, they were talking about they definitely win in '99.
Oh
right?
yeah, absolutely.
A strike shortened season. So you give those guys fresh legs, only 50 regular season games, they definitely win.
Absolutely.
There's no two ways about it if they bring them back. So they definitely win number 7. Number 8 is the only one where you could kind of question, all right, are they stretching it too far? But, I mean, you could have brought him back for another round. I mean, there's no two ways about that. And as much as Scottie Pippen hated him, don't forget that contract that Scottie got paid out on in Houston, that was a sign and trade. So Jerry Krause paid him and then sent him to Houston. He made sure he got his money. So as much as Scottie Pippen hated Jerry Krause, he signed $100 million. He made $100 million off.
He ended up making more money than Michael, right? I think it was when it was all said and done. Yeah,
right. And so people, and don't get me wrong, it's the most indefensible thing ever done in the history of sport, breaking up that team. But for all of it, I mean, if you really wanted to be objective about it, he did way more good than bad. Way more. I mean, he was the best. He was the best GM that the game of basketball had ever seen.
So then episode 2 is a lot more on Scotty, and we get to find out a little bit about Scotty, which, I mean, his story, this is a lot of stuff that I didn't know. This is the stuff that's incredible. Like, he was a walk-on the basketball team. He wasn't even like a scholarship player. He was like, he made his way onto the team and then got drafted. And the fact that they trade up to draft him coming out of like an NAIA school is just incredible. Like another like feather in the hat of Krause. But he comes in immediately, and it doesn't take long for Michael to realize like this is going to be his running mate. And I thought, to me, like that was one of the things that really stood out, is that you don't hear Michael really praise a lot of other people often. He just doesn't. That's just not in his being. Like you said, he's so competitive. He's the greatest. He did it recently with Kobe after Kobe passed, and he did it with Scotty. And he just said, I thought one of the things that really stood out to me was, when anyone mentions Michael Jordan, they should be mentioning Scottie Pippen too, because I don't do any of this without him. So there was like a love and a respect between those two. Unlike any relationship, like very many relationships that we see, he really, really knew what Scottie could do for him on the basketball court.
They were like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, right? I mean, they danced a beautiful dance that no one else could ever do. They're the greatest tandem in history. And
absolutely,
Scottie Pippen. So Michael, like the difference between Michael and everybody else was that in all aspects of the game, he was better than everybody else, right? Everyone knew he was the best scorer. He was the best dunker, right? He probably had the best jump shot. He absolutely had the best first step. He was probably the best ball handler. Okay. He was the best defender in the league.
Yep.
And Scottie Pippen was the second best at all those things on the team. I mean, it was like you go down the list. And probably in the last 3 years, he was the better defender. He had the tougher defensive assignments, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because Michael needed to save his legs a little bit to score, right? So Scotty was the better defender in the second three-peat, and the way that they played the lockdown defense, that perimeter defense, there's nothing like it in the league today, and there's never been anything like it.
The length of Scotty too out there, just unbelievable.
Right? I mean, it was impossible, and what compounded it. So you have this perimeter defense. So good luck getting through it. And then when you don't get through it, they're on the break, right? And you've got, if anybody else leads the break, right? Usually it was Scotty leading the break. But if anybody else leads the break, they've got Michael on one wing, Scotty on the other. And you could have your entire team down there. You're not going to stop them. So it was just a force of just will that you couldn't ever comprehend getting through. And it was so intimidating that, a lot of those teams in that 72 win season in 96, they scared a lot of teams. I mean, they beat a lot of teams.
It was mental. They beat you before the game started.
Yeah, they just scared the hell out of them. They didn't want to see him. They're like, it's going to be awful.
It's amazing to think about too, like how he was so good at that time. But Pippen would have been even maybe better in this era with like the switchable. How they're playing with no bigs. He could like guard all 5 positions. He would be like incredible right now.
Right. I mean, he was a shorter but better version of Anthony Davis. He was a point guard who grew into a forward. I mean, he played, and he created the position. I mean, there's no such thing as a point forward before Scottie Pippen. I mean, he created the position.
And we find out, it's weird. It's kind of like it was like a perfect storm. I think the reason why he ends up taking that really crappy contract early on, after the 91 season, is because it's a lot of it had to do with his upbringing and where he came from. We found out, they didn't have a lot of money. I think one of his brothers said, we didn't realize we were poor. We were having fun, but we were poor. And then there were multiple people in his household that were handicapped, that were in wheelchairs. I think he probably had this like, man, I could lose all of this at any moment. I want to get the most security that I possibly can right now. So for someone like that, I mean, when you're a 21, 22-year-old kid, you don't know what's the difference between 100 million and 18 million, right? Like there's no
that's part of it. I think a bigger part of it, and people like to say, well, he signed a dumb contract. I mean, he wasn't just smart enough. Nobody could predict what the NBA was going to do.
Yes,
nobody could predict that. Michael Jordan was going to be making $2 million in 1991 and $36 million in 1998. No one could predict that. So, I mean, Michael was the reason for that. But, and he signed it before the 92 Olympics. So the 92 Olympics were everything that the Dream Team was. They globalized the NBA. And, how many Hall of Fame European players said the first time they saw Michael Jordan, they knew they wanted to play in the NBA, right? I mean, that's like,
like Dirk Nowitzki, I mean, all the way down the list. Every Eastern European player, Tony Parker, all of them. That's, that they globalized the NBA. And so that was part of the reason salary skyrocketed, right? The 90s Bulls and the Dream Team. So no one could predict that. So he probably knew he was signing a not great contract, but he opted for security of having that 7 years versus 5, because he figured, $2.5 million a year, that's another $5 million,
sure.
Right? Instead of thinking I'm giving up $5 to $7 million a year by signing those last couple of years.
Yeah, it's a great point. Like we are able to so easily look back on it, hindsight's 2020, right, and say, man, but it was a different time. There wasn't all that money floating around at that point.
Right.
Like it would have been so hard to project what you're saying, like that Michael is going to like lead this new NBA like rejuvenation, to where the NBA is like really popular again and becoming like another, like right up on the top level of sports. Because at this time there was no like the NFL isn't the beast that we know now. It was like the NBA and MLB around this time, and even MLB had some of the issues with the steroids and with things like that people were a little turned off on. So this was like really like bread and butter time, early 90s for the NBA to be center stage, and Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
I mean, he was the biggest. Like we hear it's all easy. We got to hear some of the fun stories and stuff about him, but I mean, going to France, we got to see he was the most recognizable, not athlete, person on the planet.
Right, and the other thing is, NBA in the '90s was the biggest sport on the planet. It was bigger than and people like kids these days will think we're lying to them, but it was so much larger than the NFL. Right? I mean, I remember,
bigger. Yeah. Oh yeah.
If the Bulls were playing on a Monday night, I wouldn't even know who was playing Monday Night Football. Right, whereas opposed to 4 years ago,
wrestling would get higher Monday Night Football ratings. Yeah, wrestling on Monday Night Raw would get higher football ratings than Monday Night Football would. Yeah.
Yeah, and now if the World Series Game 3 is against Monday Night Football outdraws it, right?
Yeah.
But
or the draft
back in the '90s, but back in the '90s, the NBA was the biggest sport, bigger than baseball, bigger than football, bigger than anything, right? And it wasn't even close. Like it wasn't even close.
We got to hear some of the really fun stories that we've heard throughout, like Jordan not making his varsity basketball team as a sophomore, which is always crazy to think about because he wasn't quite big enough yet. And they said that next year he really grew up and he blossomed. And then
I played varsity basketball as a sophomore.
Right? I know. I got pulled up to varsity soccer as a freshman. It was just amazing. And then we got the Dean Smith, I think, which was one of my favorite quotes throughout the whole thing. And he said, like, nobody could ever turn it on and turn it off like Jordan, and he never turned it off.
Never turned it off. Yeah, I mean, it's just and it's so funny because you look at all the people you forget he played with Brad Doherty in college, and you forget like Roy Williams was on Dean Smith's staff at the time. Like they bring all these faces out. You're like, oh yeah, like you forget like that first Bulls team. I didn't do anything on a documentary, but that first Bulls team was like Dave Corzine and Orlando Woolridge that was like the cornerstone of the franchise at the time. I mean, it was just like you just kind of forget like all these old faces that he came across, and it really wasn't that long of a time, right? Think about it. It was 1984 to 98, so that's 14 years. Like I've been at TVG for 19 years.
Yeah,
I mean that's like it's 14 years, and just think about how different the world was and how different. Like the different player we saw, the rookie, who was just kind of like this bright-eyed kid coming out of North Carolina.
What did he say that when he was in his like one of the first interviews? He was like, "Well, yeah, I guess maybe I can help improve this team a little bit." He was so like humble and so different than the Jordan we would know even just 6-8 months a year later.
Yeah, and then he was an alpha male, and it was just like, those puppy teeth were sharp, but they grew out quick, man. It's just wild to see it. And it's wild for me to see it all again. Cause like I said, these are not like hard memories for me to pull up. Like these are like the easiest part of my time to recall, part of my life to recall.
It's unbelievable when you see, Magic Johnson and Larry Bird after not having played with him that long, immediately just saying like, this guy is it. Like we knew there was trouble. We knew that this guy was going to be coming for us as soon as they packed it up. Like those are the kind of things where it's the peers around you, right? And I don't think everybody loves to have the LeBron Jordan debates, which are stupid in my opinion. You know what I mean? It's like they're different players, they're different everything. But I think we watch some of this stuff. It's just hard to ever compare. Not LeBron, not Kobe, like anybody to this guy. He was just he didn't seem like a person. He seemed like a superhero. Right? He wasn't even like a real man.
Well, and the thing that I would say is that the difference between Michael and, any other player you could say is the best ever, right? Whether it's, LeBron or Kobe for the modern day, or whether you want to, throw like some of the old time players in there, like, Kareem or whatnot, or, Larry. It's not how he played, what he did, all those things. The separation between him and the second best guy in the NBA was the largest you've ever seen.
That's
like there was like, I don't like who was the second best player. I mean, Michael Jordan should have won the MVP every year he was in the league. Yeah. Period. And it was cute. It was cute they gave it to Charles that year, but he destroyed him in the finals, right? And it was nice they gave it to Karl Malone, but he destroyed him in the finals. Like there's
Kellerman said question at one point where it's like, I don't know if there's any person who's ever done anything as well as he played basketball. Like, we're not even talking about him being the best. We're talking about like somebody that's a cook. Like anything that you do, he literally had it mastered. And as you mentioned, he's so much better than the person that was chasing him. It was incredible that a guy like that was able to find things to continue to motivate himself, to continue to put a chip on his shoulder throughout. Because it could have been really easy for someone like that to get bored and just be like, oh, you know what? I've already won 3. I'm so much better than than everyone else here. This really isn't even that much of a challenge. It's kind of what happened when he went to baseball a little bit, but he kept continuing to find ways to you had said this too. He didn't just want to beat you. He wanted to destroy you.
Yeah. And you needed to bow down at the altar of Michael, right? And the only apt comparisons that we've seen to Michael Jordan are not in basketball, right? It's Babe Ruth, it's Muhammad Ali.
Yep.
And
maybe Tiger.
And Tiger, and people, trying to find like historical perspective on Tiger, I'll say this, and whether he ever catches Jack or not, I think it's irrelevant. The golf that Tiger Woods played between 1996 and 2008 is the greatest stretch of golf ever played in mankind, and you'll never see it again.
Yep.
You will never see someone dominate the game like that ever again. Well, in that respect, I think you can put him on that level with a Michael Jordan and a Muhammad Ali and a Babe Ruth. But but that's it. I mean, that's your list, right? You can't have that kind of a guy. And Wayne Gretzky in hockey, but even at the end of Wayne's career, there was discussion, well, is Mario better? And then,
it's more than even like, it's the eyeballs and the interest that they brought in too. It's, not only are they great, but it's like, we look at someone like Mike Trout, he's a great baseball player, but nobody knows who he is and very few people care, and it's like, everybody cared about Michael Jordan, about basketball. It was like the same, and that was kind of like with Tiger too. I don't watch a whole lot of golf anymore. I like golf; it's fine. But when Tiger's playing, I was watching with my dad every Sunday on that final round. Like
you had to watch.
Yeah. And that's what Michael Jordan was. There's just so few icons that we'll ever get to see, and nobody ever comparable again. The shoes was amazing too. It's like, hey, if you sell this amount of shoes in a year, we'll get our investment in, and he like tripled that in like a couple months. It was just.
Right. The whole thing with the Jumpman brand was, like, at some point, Nike couldn't pay him. They're like, yeah, we're just going to give you your own brand, and you're going to have equity in it, because we can't. There's no amount of like sponsoring a guy and putting him on posters and in commercials that's worth what he is. So Nike so Nike basically said, all right, this is your brand and you have a major equity in it, and that can't, like, I can't have you on payroll anymore. We just have to, there has to be another way to go about this, right? You're way too valuable to this whole operation.
Mike, this was a blast. I'm gonna have to try to talk you into coming back with me in the next couple of weeks so we can continue to recap these. Maybe in 2 weeks we can go through the next 4, or I don't know. We'll figure something out, because I knew talking to you about this. Like, it's different to look back on something versus living it. You lived this. You went through all of this. I can read articles, and I can rewatch the old games, and I can look back. But like, I wasn't. This would be like the Shaq Kobe era for me. What this was for me.
And even the title, they're like, oh, The Last Dance. And they gave like this explanation of it. I'm like, no, they were, that's what they were calling it. Like, this isn't a shocking title. We all knew that. Like, they were calling it The Last Dance in interviews. They were, yes, it was The Last Dance. I remember that. Like, people are like, oh, The Last Dance. Like, that's really, I'm like, it's not great. Like, Phil, that's when he started. And in the first episode, they tell the story about it. Like, yes, we all knew that. That's what they were calling it. This was common knowledge. This is not like some interesting little factoid, right? Like, no, we all knew that. We saw that. It was The Last Dance. Got it.
So we got 2 episodes down. They're gonna continue to show 2 episodes every Sunday coming for the next few weeks. I believe there are going to be 4 more weekends of this still to come. Mike Joyce, thank you very much. Let the folks know what's your schedule like the next couple of days. When can we see you on TVG?
I'm doing morning show on Thursday. I think this is probably what it's going to be like. The schedule's come out real late. Morning show on Thursday, so 9:30 to 12:30 Pacific, and then I do these doubles on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I do the lead-in, because we're doing shows on NBC Sports now. So I do the lead-in at NBC Sports from 11 to 1, and then I do the last hour of NBC Sports with my man Weaver. So it's like me and Weaver jump in to just throw a monkey wrench into the fine working machine works of whatever they have going on during the previous 4 hours.
And I'm sure you with your Los Al roots have to be pretty pumped at what's been going on over there the last couple of weeks. Holy crap with those pools, man. $340,000 for the early pick 4.
I know, and I got to work on my game. I'm trying to fire on a pick 4. I'm I don't even know half these guys. What it used to be, I could fire blind. Just give me a programmer and overnight. Yeah. I feel like I had a shot because I was there every night. But yeah, I gotta dive back in.
They are reaping the benefits as some of the other tracks in California are closed. Hopefully that will change very soon. Mike, man, this was a blast. It was fun to catch up with you, and then it was cool to focus on the Last Dance stuff for the last half an hour or so. I'll shoot you a message. Maybe we can link up again in the next few weeks. Take care of the baby. Tell Dina I said hello. Love you, brother. Thanks for doing this.
I love you, Gino. Thanks, man.
Okay, have a nice one. That was Mike Joyce from TVG. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to hear from one of our sponsors, but don't go anywhere. Just wanted to remind you about one of the sponsors of That's What G Said podcast, Sarah Candle Company. Visit sarahcandles.com, CERA candles.com. Use the promo code GINO for 10% off of your entire purchase. These are all-natural soy wax candles. They burn longer. They are better for you than the candles out there that have that traditional paraffin wax. I know the people from this company personally. I've grown up with them my whole life. They love candles, and the goal was to have an affordable candle that everyone can enjoy. Use that promo code GINO. My favorite is Fresh Roses. The Fresh Roses scent is awesome. If you're a horse racing fan, they got Del Mar in there. You ever want to know what Del Mar smells like, but you couldn't make it out there? Order your candle right now from Sarah Candle Company. The website, CERA candles.com. sarahcandles.com. Promo code GINO for 10% off your purchase. Big thanks to Mike Joyce. As you can see, he has got just great insight. It's when you lived through, an era like that, you just remember a lot of little things, and he obviously is a great source to talk to about the Bulls and that era of Chicago Bulls basketball. Let's jump into talk about some horse racing for Thursday. Get your Gulfstream Park past performances out, and let's start in race number 1. I think if you're going to play some kind of early pick 5s, I would just single the 7 here. This barn has been really cold as of late, actually. But the blinkers come off coming out of a race that's just a lot better, probably the quickest in here. So this is a good spot to maybe just single in if you're playing an early pick 5 and move on. I do expect this horse to get played. I mean, on paper she should be like 7-5, but we do have to say the barn has been cold, and they're a barn that gets bet a lot. So obviously tread lightly with their recent numbers, but that doesn't usually bother me because it kind of swings back and forth. Let's go to race number 2, and this one would be pretty kind of I would be kind of Captain Obvious here. No real strong opinions. To me, the horses they look like the 6 Cabrino had a slow start and then closed really well. The 5 Water Wizard obviously makes a lot of sense. The 1 Bust Out Lady on the cutback. If she works out the trip here, I'd be willing to put a few bucks on her on top, but I'm a little concerned about, from the rail, can she get the lead? If she gets the lead from the rail cutting back, she could be really, really tough to pass. And she knows the drill. Another one who wouldn't really shock me. So nothing real outside the box there. I would just be 1, 6, 5, and 7. In the third race, I like the 6 in here, Make a Mint, who was last seen on December the 11th and was close up after a good start, and then was kind of outrun a little bit, but closed really nicely for third, and That was, going 5 furlongs on the turf. I don't think she necessarily has to be as far back in there. And there's just not a ton in this race, right? Like, she's just done actually some decent work when many in here have not. The one dash with the blinks on, going to go second off the bench. Obviously, I think a race she needed last time out. She could show a little more speed from the inside and maybe be pretty tough in here from the rail, flashing some speed. The forward, Princess Avril, another one who will likely be forwardly placed in here. We'll see what she's got first time on the grass. There's just not a lot in this race, so that's why I'd lean to the 6 Make a Mint, and I'd go 6-1-4 in here. In the fourth, the 4 is interesting. I like the fact that Time to Two Step has shown a little improvement when stretched out. She showed, kind of like a sit off the pace a little bit last time out and then moved early to the lead. She did what she was supposed to do as the heavy favorite that day. Every right to improve and step forward with the race under her belt now. And she's not going to be too far out of it. She's going to just get a good trip. The 6 in here, Painter Fest, for just an awesome barn off the claim. The 1, Samoa, who should be flashing some speed down from the inside. The 3, Stormy Boss, who's going to be forwardly placed in here and just missed in a similar spot. I'd be 4-6-1-3 with the 4 on top. In the 5th race, this to me is, the 7, Valdalobo, who's looking for a 3rd consecutive win, but has had to go to the bench, after each of them. But she shouldn't be too far out of it early on. Dermot should be right in the mix. And what I like about Dermot, too, I think she's a little bit better when she can sit, but she's shown that she has some speed. She's also shown that she can come from behind and show like different tactics in some of her last couple of races when you go back and check them out. Going to have to improve a little bit on willing to speed, though. So to me, those are the 3 horses in there, 6, 7, and 8. In the 6th race, Untitled is just going to be a really heavy favorite. It's a great spot for him as a Florida bred, getting back in against state breds after finishing 2nd in the Gotham. Well, last we saw him. If you're looking to try to beat him, it would probably be winking at the dude who goes into a solid barn and was a recent winner last time out. But I mean, this is just a really good spot for Untitled. In the 7th race, I have 8, 11, 12, 9 in here. If you're looking to play some of the exotics, I think Home Base is a price that's worthy of some inclusion. Dr. Edgar makes a lot of sense. Morocco obviously figures in here. So nothing too crazy, nothing out really like outside the box, just pretty logical. It's in the last couple races where I have a little more of a strong opinion. So I think the 6, Little Miss Hot Mess in race number 8 is a must-use and a horse we should put a few bucks on to win. Really big fan of the last out victory, and I actually think the 7 furlongs will be perfect. She can sit a little bit off the pace. She kind of was a little more forced from the inside last time out, and I don't expect her to be right on the lead. She has the ability to go to the front, but she's probably a little better when she's just sitting right off. So I'm 6-2, Money Never Sleeps, Topo Grigio, Bird Map, obvious contenders, but let's have the 6. I kind of have the 6 and the 2 as the top tier in here. In the 7th race, the 1, Temple, going to be very tough. Just doesn't really run bad races. But the horse I'm going to try to key in on in this race is the number 7, Rise the Guy, who's going to go 3rd start of the year now, and I think he's going to be ready for his absolute best. He takes the blinkers off on February the 22nd. He really never got a shot to run. He had nowhere to go late and down on the inside when he really wanted to get going. He was just traveling really, really well, and it was just super sneaky trouble. He was behind Largent, who came back to win, and he was right up on the lead, pressing in the 2 path until late, and he faded. I think he's kind of a similar one. I didn't love the kind of pressing from the 2 path. I much would have rather see him either try to clear off or take back a little bit. He was kind of caught in between. So let's give him another shot in here. Rise the Guy, number 7 in race number 9. Let's use along with the 1 Temple, and then to close things out in race number 10, the 3 Sweet Blossom. She's not a win machine on the turf, but who here is in like really good recent form? This is a great spot for her. She completely missed the break, put a line through that last start, and that was on the dirt. And then go back and look at some of the turf form, right? Last time we saw her on the grass was against the 30 claimers, so that was, that's not even a bad race against tougher. And the races at Tampa are the ones that really would fit nicely in here. Sweet Blossom, the number 5. Trilby looks like the one to beat. The 7 Retro Street should be in the mix, and tough to leave out Sweet Story. So 3, 5, 7, 10 there. If you want to play any kind of late exotics, kind of talk you through those. In the first race, number 7, Calentita will probably be a horse to key in on in the early exotics. The third race, don't forget about the 6, Make a Mint. Fourth race, the number 4, Time the Two-Step. Fifth, the number 7, Valdolobo. 8th race, the number 6, Little Miss Hot Mess. 9th race, the 7, Rise the Guy. And the 10th, the 3, Sweet Blossom. Make sure to include those in your exotics. Let's get you over to Oaklawn for Thursday, April the 23rd. And the plays will start in race number 3. For me, the play here is the 6 Moonshine Moment. I think if you toss the last out race going along in the slop against Better, key off the 2 back race against the Arkansas Maiden Bred Special Weights, now you get the drop in class. He should show his best today. That February race, he had a slow start. He was in some traffic. He was in tight. He was shuffled from the inside. He took back. He was like 10 off of it. He angled around. He was a really nice sustained rally up for third. If you get an effort similar to that, that's going to win this race. Moonshine Moment. Big shot in here. The 10 is probably the one to beat. That's Thornish, who tried tougher last time out, drops back down, and if you just key off the races at this level, he's going to be really tough in here. But the 6 is the key. Let's make a win wager if we can get anything around 7-2, 3-1 or so. In race number 4, I like the 3, Full of Run. I think the sprint race will have sharpened up his speed a little bit. He's going to stretch back out for his second start at Oaklawn Park. If you look back a few starts, the races that he comes out of aren't bad. Even that race back at Hawthorne, he was behind a horse who had won 6 in a row, Slick Silver. Full of Run was completely outrun early on last time out, but he settled. He was about 5 lengths off. He was 4 wide. He got up to within a couple lengths, but he was really wide at the top of the lane. He won the battle for second. He was chasing a 3-5 winner that got a perfect forwardly placed trip in a small field, and that was Drina Star's second win in a row. I think it's going to be a really good spot for Full of Run, the 10 Moment, probably the one to beat in here. Maybe we hook them up in some of the exotics there. And then race number 5 is a fun one. I mean, you can make cases for many in here. I'll start with Assad, the 12, who ran into some traffic when he was down on the inside. He was traveling best. He couldn't really re-rally after that. He's kind of a grinding type. This drop should help. I just don't want to see him too far back because I don't know if he's going to be the type of horse who can come rolling. He needs to be like mid-pack to, too forwardly placed so that way he can just kind of keep grinding. The 1, Urbanite, he was in the slop last out. Now he's going to put 2 starts together. He's going to drop. He saves ground. He adds the blinkers in here. Big shot for Urbanite. What's wrong with the 7, Squared Straight, who is going to be a first-time gelding now, gets back to the main track after facing, Calbred Maiden Specials. Comes out to Oaklawn. The 8, Mow and Go, logical contender. You can just put a line through his race in the slop last time out and be very forgiving about that one. The form prior to that would really fit against this group of 30 claimers. How about the 4, Marquis Thunder, who's a first-time gelding and a major pace factor in here. The 5, Dies is probably some speed on the stretch out. A barn that's really good with second out runners. And There's not a ton of other pace in here. Wouldn't be shocked if this one maybe showed a little speed stretching out. This is a fun race. I have it 12-1, 7-8-4-5. With 12, a sod on top. And then getting to race number 6, which is the start of your late pick 4. The 2 Hidden Promise. I mean, why can't he come right back and win this race? I liked his last effort. There are no monsters in here. Who really scares you? The 10, Exaltation. He comes out of a live race. He was fit. The 7th place finisher came back to win 30 non-2 Aggressivity. Exaltation was 4 deep. He was in between. He just never seemed like he was getting over the sloppy racetrack all that well. The 6 Young Phillip was a most recent winner at Sam Houston. It took him a while to break his maiden, but then he finally put it all together. He crushed, and he should be right up on the lead in here. Sometimes it just takes horses like that a while to get it figured out, and then you see them rattle off 2 or 3 wins in a row. The 11 Belu's Gold, who ran into, he was a debut winner, and then he hooked a sloppy racetrack and a sloppy racetrack, and so you can easily be forgiving about both of those. If you put a line through those, I mean, we're playing him off of that debut win. The 3 Alex's Strike. What's wrong with this one? Slight drop in class. You have a horse who hasn't been beaten much as of late. Botero just beaten by the 16 non-2s. It was a very similar spot. Another cool race to sink your teeth into and to kick off that late pick 4. And we move to race number 7. And I have 2 horses as kind of a top tier in here, and that's the 6 Whiskey Echo first. He had to hesitate early, and he was able to work his way up to 4th, but then he was up on the inside. He got that inside shuffle, and he came on again in the 2 path. He angled outside in between, and then he had to duck back to the inside. He was not far out of second. It was a pretty good effort last time out from the inside. Now he gets off the rail. He can show a lot more speed than that. Don't be shocked if this one's like really close to or right on the engine. But I think sitting just off would serve him best in here because there's a couple other speeds. The 11 Facilitator. I mean, he just has been sharp as of late. He had a really wide trip on February the 28th. If you can excuse him for that effort, when he was actually favored against many of these, you're left with a couple really nice efforts. I think he ran into some traffic last time out, not the smoothest of trips. Facilitator is a must-use in all of the exotics. Below them, the 7 Stay Home would be no shock. Second off the bench, kind of ran into a sloppy racetrack last time out. Sometimes it's just, you become like a merry-go-round races, and that was from the rail. Gets off the inside. The 5 Courting a Kiss, just a repeat of the 2-back race, wins this. The 3 Spokane Eagle has really, really good speed. The 8 Cold Truth beat, some of these 2 starts back. And then he ran into a sloppy racetrack last time out. Like, you can be forgiving for a lot of these horses on the sloppy tracks. Even the horses that have wins over a sloppy track, just because the sloppy track becomes like such a variable sometimes. Like, and not necessarily every sloppy track is the same, right? I had 6-11 as like my top horses, and then 7, 5, 3, 8 below them. In race number 8 at Oaklawn, we'll go with the 4 Kiss More. I mean, she just looks like the one to catch and beat in here. On April the 3rd, she was 3 deep going into the turn, then it was in the 2-path pressing, moved to the lead, put away the other speeds, opened up 3, but just could not hold off the winner. Was still a clear-cut second that day. She beat a couple of today's rivals last time out. The concern is that this could be pushing how far she wants to go. I don't know if she really wants to go this far. But she has every right to have a major advantage. I mean, she's won it a mile, but this is probably pushing it for her. The 1 road test, looking for 3 in a row, just in excellent form right now. And the number 10. Resurrection Road, who, comes in from Mahoning, but she was competitive at Keelan a couple starts back. She's been competitive at Churchill Downs. She's going to take a little step forward. She's going to be a little fitter with that race under her belt last time out. I think she's drawn well in here to have some options, right? See what the pace inside of her is going to do. Go if they have to, sit off. She has a little speed, so I don't know if she shouldn't be outrun in here against this group. Let's go for 110. With the 4 hopefully having the lone speed advantage. To close things out, I wouldn't be shocked if the 2 gets bet really hard in here, Seattle Slang. She was really impressive in her first start as a 3-year-old. And she's got a nice pedigree, too. So her first couple starts, she was going long, and those were at 2. Her dam is a grade 1 winner, was a multiple graded stakes winner, and her dam actually got better with racing. So maybe she's just kind of like her mama, and she's going to continue to get a little bit better as she's gotten older. So her 3 races at 2, they weren't bad. Nothing wrong with them. But she goes to the bench on November the 22nd after a 5th place finish, and she actually comes out of a couple productive. She was racing in some strong maiden special weight races at Churchill. So no racing between November and then March the 14th at Fairgrounds. Comes back at Fairgrounds, slow away. She draws the inside. She's saving ground. She's 5th. She's about 5 lengths off, and then going into the turn, she moves up the rail really. She's about 5 off going into the turn. She settles, and then she starts to move up really, really nicely. She gets all the way up to 2nd. She angles to the 2-path. She angles around the pace setter, and then she kind of has to wait in between horses for a minute because she gets kind of in tight. I think she still was figuring things out a little bit. She waits. She puts away the rival early in the stretch and then just draws off. And she beat Older last time out. And this is a great, great spot for her. Seattle Slang, absolutely love her. Maybe a horse you can kind of single in on the back end of the exotics. The 1 Lucky Betty, off that big maiden win. Once she's stretched out, she should be flashing speed from the inside. I would use her in some exotics. And then Majine, who's a multiple winner, who she's going to need a trip out there, but you're facing a lot of horses who have just that 1 victory, and that's a decided advantage for a horse who has shown the ability to have that kind of trip that you want, that can sit just off the pace. Now she's going to stretch out, so is she going to be right on the lead going a mile into 16th? We'll see if she has that same running style, or is she just going to be, pushing the pace and maybe hooked a little wide out there. She's kind of a wild card, but I think she has some ability going long for the first time. That's Majine there on the outside. 2-1-11 there at Oaklawn. So in the 3rd race, maybe a pick 3 at Oaklawn Park. 6-10 with 3-10 with 1-4-5, 7-8-12. 7-8-12. 6-10 with 3-10 with 1-4-5, 7-8-12. In the 6th race, if you're playing any late pick 4s, I thought the 2 on the back end in race number 9 we could single. The 6th race looks like a real spread out kind of race. The 7th race kind of feels the same. And then maybe it's 1-4-10 with 2 to close things out. So maybe it's spread out, 1-4-10 with 2. Make sure race number 3, the 6 Moonshine Moment. The 4th race, the 3 Full of Run. 5th race, the 12 Assad. 7th race, the 6 Whiskey Echo. 8th race, the 4 Kiss More. 9th race, the 2 Seattle Slang. That is your Thursday horse racing. Let's hear from one of our sponsors, and then we'll jump right into Friday. One of the sponsors of That's What G Said podcast is Cindy Carava, full-service realtor, and I am here over in Glendora at Coldwell Banker with Cindy Carava. Cindy, how was 2019 for you? Tell us a little bit about what kind of stuff you were working on.
Hi, Gino. Thanks for having me. 2019 was just really great. I had a great year selling homes all the way from Altadena, Arcadia, Monrovia, out to Upland and Ontario just recently. The market has been really good. We're looking forward to 2020 with an increase in home prices about 5.8% this year, opposed to last year where it was a little softer. We saw more like homes averaging about 3.5% in increase in value. It's also looking great for buyers. The interest rates right now are going to be staying under 4%. So if you've been on the fence about thinking about buying a home, now is the time to do so with interest rates still staying low.
And you offer more services than just the buying, selling, and leasing homes. Tell us about some of the other services that you offer and what a full-service realtor really is.
So you're right, Gino. Besides me being a full-service realtor of finding properties for my clients to buy or selling their homes or finding rentals for them, I also have a plethora of resources like handyman, contractors, electricians, plumbers. I even, if you're thinking about getting a home loan, I actually work with 2 great lenders that I can recommend to anybody.
And you're all over the internet, social media, websites. Let us know some of the places where we can find you. I know I've seen some reviews on Yelp and on Zillow. Everyone always has positive things to say. Everybody hears me raving about you all the time. But where can everyone else find out information about you or contact?
Thank you, Gino. Yeah, I am on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn. And you can contact me on my website, which is www.cindykarava.com, or my email, which is cindyc.realtor@gmail.com, or feel free to call or text me on my cell phone, which is 626-394-6400.
Cindy is awesome. She's one of the kindest and most genuine people I've ever met. I promise you, you will enjoy every minute you interact with her. So thank you very much, Cindy. Appreciate all of your support from That's What G Said podcast.
Thank you, Gino. Have a great day, everyone.
Let's talk some Friday racing, April the 24th. Get your Gulfstream Park past performances out. Let's get your race number 1. And I played Faez last time, and he got crossed over on going into the first turn, and then he was kind of down inside. He did not have the smoothest of journeys. He actually ran really well. I think he's probably a horse to use in some exotics, but I prefer the 9 in here first in time. He was squeezed out of a spot early on. He ends up 3 deep. He has to take up, and he has to lose his momentum. He closed well late, and was not far out of second that day and not far behind Faez. Let's put the 9 on top of the 7, and then the 3, Grand Champagne, perhaps stretching out, trying the grass. This one can show a little speed in here. 9, 7, 3. If we can get like 5-2 on first in line, maybe we'll play a win wager on the 9. In race number 2, the 4 Heartling does look like the one to beat. Was in tight early, really wanted to go, got shuffled from the inside. I think it's just a toss, and expect to see her much closer early on today, and maybe Saez getting a little more aggressive with her. But the horse I'm actually going to really look at and make sure to use in all your, if you really pick 5s and everything, is the 6 Boss Wife. Put a line through her last race, which was on the grass, right? Okay, she doesn't like the grass. Easy excuse. So go through her career. Her first couple races, I mean, what did she do wrong? She's 3rd in her debut. She comes back and she runs 4th. She comes back again and finishes 4th. Those races are going 7, 6.5, and 6. Then she stretches out to a mile, and she takes a noticeable step forward, moving up lengths on February the 23rd, and then March the 14th when she breaks her maiden. I mean, this has been a different... She's always had some ability, but then she's really improved since she stretched out. I think because people see that really bad race last time out on the grass, they'll kind of forget a little bit about her. But who the hell in this race scares you? Right? Like, it's not... This is the type of race where it's primed to take a shot with a horse here. If she's anything around 10-1, she's worthy of a win wager. That's Boss Wife. Let's use with the number 4 Heartling in some of your early exotics. Third race, I mean, you can legitimately make a case for many in here. The Barboza first-time starters, the 2 Gwen at Akita. I mean, this barn is really good with first-timers. They're 19 for their last 102. They're 3 for their last 8. Just kind of solid overall. And both of these horses have decent pedigrees. The Dam was 0-4 for Grand at Akita, but the 3 foals are all multiple winners. And then go to the other Barboza first-timer, Grand Michelle. The Dam actually won her debut at Gulfstream Park. Grand Michelle has a couple siblings. They're both winners for a barn whose first-time starter statistics are just the same here. So I wouldn't be shocked to see either one of those horses run really well. The 3 Paneria, I wouldn't try to take a shot against her. She sat 3-4 deep. She was right on the lead early in the stretch, and that was her first start since October. She should be much, much fitter today. Even the 7 Cozy Dreams, I didn't love her last start. I wanted to see more fight from her. But she proved 2 starts back, and she's getting reunited with that jockey, that she can sit off the pace and be very competitive against this group. She's burned money in her last 2 starts, but she wouldn't be a shock in here. So now we're already talking about, the 5, the 3, the 2, the 6, and the 7. We're basically have turned this race into what looks kind of like an all race. I do think that I would have the 2, 3, and 5 as my top tier. In race number 4 at Gulfstream, the 5 Wild About This gets off the rail, and she was making her first start at 5 furlongs on the turf. It was a really solid third. She just missed second that day. I'm expecting her to continue to improve. I think this is a good spot for her. Wild About This, we have on top the 3. I'm praying for that. Exit's a really strong race. And if you just key off her two-back race on February the 6th, she's going to be a major player in here. So I have the 5 and 3 is kind of the top 2. The 6-horse Cultivation, I think, is going to get a big jock upgrade today. Had some trouble last time out, when actually you're beaten favorite. And then Borrowed Angel, who adds the blinks for the big drop-in class. 5-3-6-2. In race number 5, the 2 Tiger Blood's going to take a ton of money. He loves to win races, right? I'm not against him. But if you want to use one other with Tiger Blood, throw in the 8 Coupe Tries Harder. He stumbled at the start. He got caught in between horses. He was loaded behind horses in early stretch. He just couldn't find anywhere to go. He tried to move in between, nowhere to go. He ducked to the inside, but it was too late. Now he's going to go second start off the bench, and he catches a field that has, at least a couple speed players in here. He should be able to get a nice trip. Coupe Tries Harder. The number 8 we'll use with the 2 Tiger Blood. Below them, the 4 What's Inside was not far behind Tiger Blood in here. And if horses like Frenchman Street and Factorino and Sturgeon are able to put the pressure on Tiger Blood, then it's going to set up nicer today for a horse like What's Inside. And then the 6 Frenchman Street, who has speed but can also sit off the pace if he has to. 8-2-4-6 there. 8-2-4-6 in race number 5. I don't love a whole lot on the late part of the card, except for one horse in race number 8, and that's the 2 Secret Stash. So the number 2 Secret Stash was a step slow in her last start. She settled in 8th, and then she got stuck inside behind horses. She had nowhere to go. She moved all the way up into contention at the top of the lane. It was a fine third. I just think that early trouble did her in, and she wasn't able to get into the position that she needed before she wanted to start her rally. So, Secret Stash with the March race underneath her should improve today in here. The 2 Secret Stash will make a win wager if we can get anything around like 3-1 or so. So maybe an early pick 5 in here, where we could do something like a single the 9 in race number 1 with the 4-6 with the all, with 2-3-5-6 with 2-4-6-8. You play a different ticket where you go 3-7-9 with 4-6 with 2-3-5 with 2-3-5-6 with 2-8. Horses to take a look at throughout the Friday, April 24th card. First race, the number 9, first in line, anything around 5-2. The second race, the number 6, Boss Wife, anything around 10-1. The fourth race, the number 5, Wild About This. Maybe if we can get like 7-2, we'd play a win wager there. Fifth race, the number 8, Coupe Tries Harder. If we can get 5-1, we'd put a few bucks on Coupe Tries Harder. And then in the 8th race, the number 2, Secret Stash, anything around like 3-1 or so. That is Gulfstream Park for Friday. Let's get you over to Oaklawn Park for Friday. Oaklawn Park, Friday, April the 24th. I'm just going to have, we'll talk about 4 horses throughout the card to take a look at. move on to race number 4. This will be the first of the plays. And I'm going to go to the number 2 here. Blunt Force. Just toss the races in the slop, right? Like, toss the February 6th race in the slop. Even the January, November races, like, they were fine. They're not bad. But if you just look at this horse's overall dirt form, like the one that we saw last time out at Delta on a fast main track, this is a really good spot for Blunt Force to sit a nice trip. Let's use the number 2. Blunt Force, pick a win wager if we can get anything around like 7-2 or so. In race number 5 at Oaklawn, let's go with Gangly, the 8, who's coming out of some of the better races in here. I love his running style. He can sit just off the pace if need be. He was behind a real sharp 1-2 starts back. And even the horse he lost to last time out was a highly regarded runner early on in his 2-year-old career. He's just been facing much better recently. So Gangly, let's use Gangly in all exotics. We'll make a win wager on that one if we can get big 3-1 or so. Let's get you to race number 7, and this is probably of all the horses at Oaklawn, the one I like best on Friday. This is Cavalry Charge, who was a 3rd place finisher at Fairgrounds last time out and has raced twice now in 2020 as a 3-year-old. He was 3 deep in between horses, and he was pressing. He was right on the lead, but he was in tight, and then he had to take back. He lost momentum. He lost a few lengths. He ends up re-rallying, finishing a very nice 3rd. I think Cavalry Charge is right here with all of the best horses in this race, and let's make a win wager on this one if we can get anything around 7-2 or so on the 6 Cavalry Charge. In race number 8, this looks like a good spot for the 9 Julius, who just raced at Golden Gate. He kind of had a weird trip. He got shuffled a little bit from the inside, and he was like right up on there, and then he got, he had to take back a little bit. But even late, it didn't. He looked like he still had maybe a little something left, but he kind of was wrapped up on, because I don't think he was going to finish any better than 4th. He might have been able to get a little closer. The 6 furlongs feels like it should be a good trip for him, because he has some speed, but he's actually shown that he can sit just off. And naturally, if he's up close in here, he could be tough late. So let's use the 9 Julius. We'll make a win wager if we can get 3-1 on him. Use him in all of your exotics. So the horses at Oaklawn for Friday, April the 24th. In the 4th race, the number 2 Blunt Force. If we can get 7-2, we'll make a win wager. The 5th race, the 8 Gangly, if we can get 3-1. The 7th race, the number 6 Cavalry Charge, if we can get 7-2. And the 8th race, the number 9 Julius, if we can get 3-1. We'll have another episode coming out with some Saturday, probably some Sunday racing for you. So keep an eye on that one. That'll be coming out in the next couple days, probably early on Friday. WrestleMania recap time. It's time for WrestleMania 4. We get over to Atlantic City. We get over to WrestleMania 4, 1988, the big tournament. Macho Man Randy Savage ends up walking out the champ. We go match by match with Jason Beem, with Danny Kovoloff. We talk about some of the fun commentary. We share some of the moments that we remember. We set up the whole show for you, give you everything that was happening in 1988 leading up to WrestleMania 4. Kick back and enjoy. And if if you're someone who loves wrestling, if you have the WWE Network, you can go throw this show on and watch it and then kind of follow along with us. So enjoy WrestleMania 4 recap. We go back in time again to talk old WrestleMania. We've been having a lot of fun when there's no live sporting events going on right now. So we're going back in time and recapping old wrestling events, and definitely the older ones into the late 80s, early 90s are more fun to go back on because it's real nostalgic, and we can kind of laugh and have some fun talking about the matches and the commentary. And back with me for a second time, we talked about WrestleMania 9 a couple weeks ago, and this was basically your choice WrestleMania, and we had to bring alongside to join us one of our good friends, a fan of wrestling, we'll talk about this again. We had some funny interactions at TVG back in the day. Danny Kovoloff, and Jason Beem. Thank you two for joining me today.
Well, thanks, Gino. I'll go first.
Yeah, there we go. There we go.
I'm not
still
pro. We don't
our
have-
three-man commentary booth still is a little lacking chemistry, as we can see. So we're gonna have to get better through the broadcast.
Well, Gino, if I will say, whenever I've had the multiple people interviews, you gotta kind of pass the ball around.
Yes, so I will definitely do that.
You're gonna be our Gary Payton. You be our point guard, and Danny will sit outside. I'll go to the hoop, and we'll get it done.
We'll get the three-man. So, Danny K, what's up, man? Like, give us a little bit of your wrestling fandom here. Like, you've been a wrestling fan basically your whole life, right?
Most of my life, actually, right around the time I was starting to get into wrestling, right around WrestleMania 4. I'd say, the summer after that. And back in those days, there was no pay-per-view shows in the Danny K household. So this was a frequent rental for me from Blockbuster. I remember grabbing it off and being disappointed any time someone had already checked it out. And it was this was a marathon 4-hour show, so it was the 2-tape box set.
That was what we were talking. Jason and I were talking about this last time too, and that was one of the reasons why I love this show. And Jason, I think this show gets a bad rap overall because it's long. A lot of the matches aren't great, but I really love how they tell a story throughout the show. It's like beginning, middle, end. We're seeing the ascent of Macho Man. We're finishing up all this crazy stuff that's happened with Hogan and Andre over the last year and a half. And by the end of the show, Macho Man feels like a huge star. And a year before, he was like a high upper mid Carter. This show did a hell of a lot for him.
Yeah, what I like about the tournament is it makes it so identifiable with WrestleMania 4. You could tell me oh, remember what happened at WrestleMania 16? I'm like, okay, which one was that? Was that
Yeah.
This one, that one. But if you say, the tournament, I know exactly what you're talking about. I know exactly where I was. Similar to Danny, my wrestling fandom started just about halfway between 2 and 3. And so 3 was what hooked me. And so the year leading up to 4, I watched every Saturday night, Saturday night's main event, every prime time, every show that was possible. So this was, I was living and dying by the time. I think I even filled out my own bracket in the WWF magazine they used to have.
This was great. And Danny, the year leading up to this, this is the golden age of WWF. This is actually when they had these great, year-long storylines. Hogan and Andre started way back, with their build-up to WrestleMania 3. And then there was the whole, did Andre pin Hogan early in the match? And Jesse was pushing that narrative for a while that he thought Andre won the match. And then, as Jason kind of mentioned, there were Saturday night's main events that helped build over the last year where Macho Man kind of turned from a heel to a baby face. We got the Mega Powers forming. We got and then Danny, with the two Hebners in the main event, right before that, that's one of the greatest,
Gino, just tell me, how much did they spend on the plastic surgery, brother?
What was he paying him? Oh my, some of the Hogan promos we get to talk about in this show are great. So this is golden age, golden era. And you know what? Coming off of WrestleMania 3, WrestleMania 4 doesn't have the huge, 90,000 plus people, but it was kind of a really big deal for WWF at the time because Donald Trump paid for both WrestleMania 4 and WrestleMania 5 in that he gave them a flat fee, like what happens with boxing matches or with concerts a lot of the times. They pay a flat fee because they know that the people will come into their casino and bet. And it was funny, the week leading up to this, if you were walking around in Atlantic City, you would hear Macho Man and Hulk Hogan's voices over the loudspeakers, "Oh yeah, come to WrestleMania, pick up your tickets, yeah." They were all over the place, and they made a ton of money off of this show. And like I said, everybody was buying this show now as pay-per-view was becoming. There was in more and more homes each and every year. So this is golden age, golden era. Danny was mentioning the double referee angle with Earl and Dave Hebner. So what we have at this show is there's no WWF champion. And this was the first and the only time actually in WrestleMania that the show has started without a champ. And so we're going to go through this entire show, and it's a 14-man bracket in a tournament to determine who's going to be your champ. The reason why it's 14, they gave Andre and Hogan a bye, and they meet in the first match of the second round because they were involved in the title and they had their claims to it. So when you get the start of the show, we get things started. It's a lot of gambling, Jason, kind of all throughout the night, and then we have Gladys Knight. There's just so much about this show that screams 80s, from like the costumes to some of the music, like the Strike Force theme when they come out, and it's really, really fun. I love watching back. It's nostalgic, but this is like, we see this Mania. This is definitely different than Mania 3, and it's got a different look. It's got a different feel to it, and we get things started with Gorilla and with Jesse, as we mentioned. I think, if not the best, like top 2 or 3 of any commentary team, right, Jason?
I my first note on the whole thing, Gino, is this is peak Gorilla and Jesse. I thought 3 and 4 were their 2 best.
Yep.
WrestleManias. I know they did, the 2 that was all split up, but they did 5 and 6. But I thought these 2 were particularly strong for a number of reasons. But yeah. And Euchre, I'm a big Euchre fan. Like, I think his performance in Major League is unbelievably great. He was a little over the top in this one. I think he got a little too comfortable. The whole Vanna thing was, like, it was funny for a second, but then it's like, okay, buddy, calm down.
So, Danny K, what are some of your like big picture thoughts on this show?
Just going back to Gorilla and Jesse. I know WrestleMania 4 gets a lot of flack, match quality wise nowadays, but just for rewatchability's sake, just on commentary alone, it doesn't matter what the matches are. I could watch this show anytime. Good matches, great story with the tournament from start to finish is an absolute bonus for me. Watching the Bob Uecker thing back, years and years later, it's kind of creepy in retrospect. But I watched this with Mrs. Danny K the other night, and she was kind of into it. At the end, she was excited. Hey, Bob finally meets Vanna. Spoiler. So,
and then has a seizure.
They threaded the whole show together.
Yeah, and you know what? I think, Jason, you hit it. He was really good in Mania 3, and he still has some good spots in here, but he totally like misses the punchline on the whole like Vance White thing at the end, which is the whole build up to everything, and he kind of blows it. But he definitely was a really good marriage with wrestling. Like, he and pro wrestling were like perfect for each other. Of all the celebrities there, that ever came through, he seemed like he was really enjoying it, having a fun time with it. Like him and the Jesse stuff back and forth was always really fun. And so we actually get him right off the bat when we kick things off. It's he's actually at the commentary table with Gorilla and Jesse, and we get set for the Battle Royal here. Mean Gene welcomes us in, introduces Gladys Knight. She sings kind of like a America the Beautiful like compilation. It was like My Country 'Tis of Thee was in there too at one point, I think, and she does a good job. I mean, she's a big star at this point too. No pips though, right? No pips with Gladys Knight.
Pipless, yeah.
Pipless, minus the pips. And they set up the 14-man tournament. They kind of take us through what's going to happen through the show. And the Battle Royal participants come out. Hart Foundation, which is, I think, always kind of cool when you see like the first person out in 1988, it's Bret Hart. That's kind of always shows you they were high on him with this match, and the way this match ends when he's still able to kind of look good afterwards. So it's the Hart Foundation, the Young Stallion, Sika, Danny Davis, Dangerous Danny Davis, the Killer Bees, Bad News Browns, Sam Houston, the Rougeau Brothers, Ron Bass, JYD, the Bolsheviks, Harley Race, George the Animal Steel, Hillbilly Jim, Ken Patera, and they have a massive trophy for the Battle Royal. And as a kid, I love the Battle Royals, right? You just like, it's exciting, it's fun, you get to see a bunch of everyone. You watch some of these old Battle Royals back, they're not great in the ring. They still hadn't really figured out.
All they do is punch.
They haven't figured out any like finishes, any great finishes or great ways to eliminate anyone. But when we get some great commentary right away, like the Pearl Harbor job a couple times from
Pier 6 Brawl,
Pearl Harbor job. Basically, so Euchre's back, and he right away he says this was the first time he ever got his option renewed, and he says it's like the final day of Cut Down Day, and he thinks Billy Martin should be in there somewhere. He actually was in WrestleMania back in 1, I believe, and George the Animal won't get in the ring. They talk about Vanna White a little bit, and that's when we kind of get the start of Euchre's infatuation with Vanna. And then Jason, we get Gorilla, who mentions this is the most dangerous match of all. He always says this, and it just seemed really funny because he said it at a time when there was nothing happening in the ring, like literally nothing.
And I would assume that he would have been great at Battle Royals because in his time he was the biggest guy. Like that was because back in the Andre days, I mean Andre never lost the Battle Royals, and so I would assume Gorilla was great at them as well.
And he mentions that Hillbilly Jim was one of the favorites, and that was Euchre's pick. But we're down to 3, Danny K, and it's JYD, Brett, and Bad News. And this is kind of a fun ending. Like, this is definitely something memorable. I remember the two of them teaming up. And you get Jesse and Gorilla talking about how they're going to split the purse. What are they going to do with the trophy, though? But this is a fun ending.
With Bad News, 6 months with Brett.
Yeah.
And as soon as he gets the thought out of his mouth, Ghetto Buster partnership's over. Of course, it's going to happen. First time I saw this, I wasn't wise on it, and I was a little disappointed. They were friends. How could they do that? Yeah. But set Brett up good.
We get a babyface shirt.
Good. Like, this was accomplished its goal in getting the guys they wanted to get over here.
Yeah, they did. And throughout the show, there are definitely spots where the crowd isn't really hot. In a lot of like the lesser matches with maybe some of the wrestlers they don't know as well, because that's kind of one of the problems about when you go to a casino show is that the tickets are papered. So you're not necessarily getting these hardcore wrestling fans that are all throughout the audience. You're getting a lot of people that the casinos are like giving tickets away to come into their casino and gamble. So it's kind of a different, audience. They're getting up for, the spot like this when Brett turns at the end and then Brett breaks the trophy and he throws it away. And we get a Bret Hart babyface turn very soon. And then I think not long after this show, for the next maybe 8 years, Brett is, a babyface, and he becomes, the face of the company for a few years too. So you could already see early on, they were always very, very high on Brett. Euchre leaves to go to see Vanna. And then we get a great little, Jesse, Euchre, interaction here. He says, hey, Euchre, are you after her vows? And he says, nah, just a letter or two, which was a lot of fun.
Gino, can I give you my favorite random line from Jesse at the end?
Please.
When they're talking about how good this is for Bad News, and Jesse goes, more important for Bad News, this is going to jump him in the WWF standings. And all I could think about was, where were these standings? Yeah. Like, were those in the magazine? Because the magazine was like how you like kind of stayed in touch, right? It was, looking back, it's just obviously a total PR magazine, but I was trying to remember if there was actual standings, like, do they have Honky at the top of the Intercontinental standings and what have you? But, between purse money and standings, like, that makes me laugh looking back now.
And then kind of begins like Euchre's quest throughout the night to find Vanna. His quest the year before was Moolah, but now he's
Moolahing up in the world.
He's definitely moving up. And then we get the start of the tournament. So it's Robin Leach from Lifestyles of the Rich and the Famous. He does the tournament intro, and he gives his champagne wishes and caviar dreams little line. And
doesn't count without the accent, Gino.
Champagne wishes and caviar dreams.
Why, whatever that means.
So the tournament entrants are one side of the bracket. Hulk and Andre have a bye. They're in round 2. It's Duggan versus DiBiase, Don Morocco versus Dino Bravo. And then the other side of the bracket, it's Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, Greg the Hammer, Macho Man, Butch Reed, Bam Bam Bigelow, One Man Gang, and Jake the Snake, Rick Rude. So we get Hacksaw Jim Duggan and the $1 Million Man out first. And the $1 Million Man is hot right now as a heel. He hasn't been in the WWF for that long, but he's immediately skyrocketed to up towards the main event. And basically this whole show is kind of built around him trying to buy the title from Andre, which Andre won the title at that main event show. He then immediately surrendered it to DiBiase. DiBiase actually wears the belt out. Andre puts the belt around him, and he defended it in a couple house shows, and he on the road a little bit before they end up stripping him, and then they put the title up for grabs in this tournament. So he's in round 1 against Hacksaw, and Hacksaw's hot, man. He is he's definitely always won this over with the crowd. This is, what we're going to see throughout a lot of this show is, we mentioned, quick matches. It's a tournament. They're harping on the fact that the first round is only 15 minutes. So they have to be real quick. They got to try to win very quickly. Hacksaw comes out firing in this. In most of the $1 Million Man's matches, really for his whole time in the WWF, he's weaselly. He's using cheating tactics. Virgil's helping him, or IRS, or Sherry at one point through his run. But he gets the win here because Andre helps him cheat, and Andre pulls the leg, trips up Hacksaw. Nothing special, but this kind of tells the story throughout the night. And actually, we got a little Hacksaw and Andre feud following this. So, what were your thoughts on this first match, Jason?
I was thinking about it from the lens of me being a kid when I was watching it. I didn't know who was like good at wrestling and who was bad. I didn't know who was a good worker. To me, Hacksaw was the same. You knew Macho jumped around, but like you didn't. It was all about good guy versus bad guy when you're 8 years old. At least for me, it was. And so, but Hacksaw, like, he totally connected with the crowd. Like, he had he would get pops. Like, even you see him when they introduce him, like, Hall of Fame night stuff. Like, he gets, the whole thing, and, he had people going. And, like, I love the way Jesse describes it. He goes, you got DiBiase, a classical wrestler, well-schooled, and then you got Duggan, who's a brawler. And Jesse, in his commentary, at least, hates Duggan. Like, he talked so much crap. If you like, he would always talk about how stupid he was, or how bad of a wrestler he was, and it's a kind of a funny storyline, that whole time period. I honestly wonder if Hacksaw was like, dude, why are you burying me everything? The other thing with Andre is, like, Andre ends up being a huge part of this Mania. He's like a focal part, beginning, middle, and end, and yet he's obviously only in the ring for that one match.
Yeah, because he just can't do much. So they do a good job of getting.
But he's still Andre.
Getting the most out of the spectacle that he is. Danny, I think at one point he does like a wrestling move, and just to compliment what Jason was saying, like, he says, "Oh my God, did Duggan just do a wrestling move?" But this was fun. They went on it quick. Like, I would say of a lot of the matches that throughout the night I didn't like, but I didn't have a problem with this one. This one was kind of fun, and there was a lot going on for the 4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah, no, I mean, DiBiase, you just hated him back then. Duggan, charisma like crazy, and a couple of years before, JR would be calling it a slobber knocker, but Hacksaw would always give you a bit of a slobber knocker, even if his technical proficiency wasn't there. It got Andre over as DiBiase's stooge for the night, and just a fun, quick little match that did what it needed to do.
Yeah, and then we're on to I guess we're back to Mean Gene talking to Brutus the Barber Beefcake. And Jason, we talked about this with Brutus last week. Man, this is like 87 when he turned face, from like there to 92, 93, which we did WrestleMania 9. Brutus the Barber Beefcake is over, man. Yeah. He's like a great mid-card intercontinental challenger for the title. The fans love him. He doesn't have we're talking about with Duggan. Like, you look back and you're like, okay, he's not like someone who's going to have to throw a 20-minute classic out there, but his matches are always like, the crowd's really into it. You're going to get the spots where he's kind of selling a little. He's going to come back and get his big spot, and he's going to try to cut someone's hair. It's kind of similar to Hacksaw when he brings out the 2x4. You're just like a good middle-of-the-card babyface that the people really always were behind.
The hair bit was great. Like,
it was.
He would get – I mean, I told the story at WrestleMania when we did the 9 show. Like, he was my favorite for a little while. And, I mean, when he would cut those jobbers' hair, like, I'm assuming for them it was like a total honor. But, when we'll talk about it when we get to the match. But, like, that was such a great gimmick for that time. Like, obviously now it'd be kind of corny, and Brutus's dressing is just horrendous, like, looking back. But I mean, he looks like a not drugged out member of Motley Crue.
Danny, what are your Brutus thoughts?
I mean, when he's up against someone like Honky, of course you want to see Honky get his hair cut, but just week to week on Superstars, if he's cutting some jobbers here, that's kind of a heel move, right? Those just get their butts kicked and get their hair cut for their efforts.
Well, they got $50 too.
And Hogan is so heel in this show too, with just using the chair right in front of the referee, using the chair in the final. It's funny, like, how just looking back at we cheer who they tell us is supposed to be the good guys, not necessarily based on what they do, because Hogan was very heelish, a lot of the time, but we're like, it's Hogan, it's okay, as long as Gorilla told us it was okay, we were fine with it. Then we're on to another match in the first round, Dino Bravo with Frenchie Martin, and Don Morocco with Superstar Billy Graham. Don Morocco recently turned back babyface, and he was aligned with Superstar Billy Graham. What is definitely another thing you notice about this show. Every match, there's at least one person in the corner of one of the wrestlers in every match, in all 16 matches throughout the night. And in a lot of matches, there are two, just like this. Yeah. So the managers, the valet, the people that are accompanying someone to the ring. Jesse said he taught Superstar Billy Graham everything he knows, so that means
he copied everything.
Yeah. So that means
that was a great.
Morocco knows everything. That means Morocco was basically taught by Jesse. This was just kind of one of those power matches. We get the infamous double clothesline spot. It goes 4:53. Morocco wins by a DQ here, as like Dino Bravo pulled the ref in front of him. What did you think about this one, Jason?
I loved the they didn't. I think if I remember right, the announcers didn't pick up that he did that to the ref. So when they did the slow mo, right. Jesse was in denial when they did the slow mo. You kind of, you really see it kind of because it did happen pretty quick. I thought that was really, really great use of replay. But yeah, I mean, this was certainly a let's just move the tournament along kind of match, and and The Rock got through. I think doesn't Dino have a Dark Side of the Ring coming up about his murder? Just total side thing. I think that's literally like this week.
It's coming up.
He's like a Canadian mafia thing, right?
Yeah. He was like, I think he got into like the illegal cigarette business or something like that.
Yeah, he was married to someone, right? And then he was like smuggling cigarettes in. I mean, it happened, which was really sad. I believe he wrestles the Texas Tornado in WrestleMania 7, and then a year later, by that time, they're both gone. Which is like one of those really sad things when you look back at a lot of those matches. And so I think these guys actually had a match later this year at SummerSlam too, like a rematch. But this kind of big power guys as we move along. Then we get Bob Uecker talking to Jimmy Hart in the Honky Tonk backstage. Honky Tonk's the IC champ. They're just pumping up the match later on.
Forget about Vanna White. You want to talk to the Honky Tonk man.
And you know what, Danny, too, a lot of the reason why this show changed around a lot, because the initial plans for the show were for Ted DiBiase to win the belt. But what ended up happening at that main event show, which was like 2 months before this, Macho Man was supposed to beat Honky Tonk for the IC title. Honky Tonk refused, so they have to change everything up. So it's funny, like they call an audible here. So Honky Tonk's still the champ, but it won't be long because he's going to get crushed by Ultimate Warrior at SummerSlam. But Honky was a great heel, huh, Danny?
I think it worked out well for all involved. Honky, nuclear heel, and just so entertaining to watch in his prime. And you wanted to see him get his comeuppance, and he never, ever, ever did. By hook or by crook, he was going to hold on to that belt, no matter who he was up against. And you look back at Brutus Beefcake, and it just breaks my brain that he was never Intercontinental Champion.
It really does, yeah.
I know he was supposed to get it at SummerSlam instead of Warrior, but I think he got injured. Then 2 years later, he was supposed to get it at SummerSlam 90, but there was the parasailing accident. But yeah, he feels like a guy who should have spent 6-7 months as Intercontinental Champion and never got the chance.
We'll get to that match again in just a little bit. Up next, this is the Greg Valentine versus Ricky Steamboat match in the tournament. And what's crazy about the way the tournament was set up, basically, when you look at the bracket, it's Ricky the Dragon against Greg the Hammer, and then right below that, it's Macho Man versus Butch Reed. And this is coming off of WrestleMania 3, where they have that unbelievable classic match that steals the show. So when everybody's looking at the bracket, they're just assuming that they're both going to win their matches, and we're going to get this awesome rematch where we get Steamboat and Savage again in this tournament. And I'd say this match was actually, this match was good. It wasn't long. It's Valentine and Steamboat. They go at it real quick. You see how good Ricky is, even in just like a really short match like this. A couple things that I noticed. Well, first out, he brings his son down to the ring, which was Little Dragon, which is Richie Steamboat. He was actually wrestling for a while in FCW under the name Richie Steamboat. And Gorilla gives the excellence of execution line that became Bret Hart's kind of like moniker years later. And then Jason, I know that we've talked about this before. Anytime the Hammer is in the ring, we're going to get that Gorilla line about how the Hammer needs to get warmed up and it's going to take him 15 minutes, right?
You might get disadvantage in this one. Yeah. Only got 15 minutes.
Yeah, because he looks so cardiovascularly fit, the Hammer.
Yeah. And then Danny, they were talking a lot about later on in the Macho Valentine, which we'll get to a lot about the elbows here. But Valentine was like a good worker throughout this time. He was someone that was IC champ for a while. You could put him in the ring, I think, with anyone on either side. He wasn't going to cut you much of a promo, but he was always a guy that was good. I mean, I thought this was one of the better matches of the night. It went about 9 minutes, and it was Ricky hits his flying cross body off the top rope. The hammer rolls him through, grabs the tights, covers him. He gets the win at 9-12. Pretty big upset at this time.
I think it was they kind of figured they had to have some kind of an upset early on, and I thought this was maybe the one to do it. But yeah, taking it back to WrestleMania 3, like kind of a fall from grace for Steamboat from from literally being like the number 2 high point. I know it was the better match than Hulk Andre, but it was not the high point of that WrestleMania. But to be the number 2 and then to go out like this, I do feel like we should shout out Steamboat too in light of the Michael Jordan documentary that's going on. Everybody's been freaking out. Everybody's freaking out about how they always play that Alan Parsons Project song, "Serious," and that was I always thought of. I go, oh, they got the Ricky the Dragon Steamboat song. To me, it's not the Bulls song; it's the Steamboat song.
Danny, what do you think?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Ricky Steamboat also on his way out of the WWF around this time?
Soon, not long, because he's in the NWA soon. Then he has those really good matches with Flair, and there was something weird going on with.
That explains the burial.
Yeah, there was something weird going on with like him and his wife, too. Like after they had the kid, there was something going on. I remember where he was like not around a whole lot. So yeah, it was unfortunate that he wasn't able to capitalize on that WrestleMania 3 momentum, as you mentioned. Jason,
because he was over as hell.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I understand what they were doing, because I think this night was about Savage, and I think they were a little bit worried about, hey, if we put Savage and Steamboat in the ring together, that fan is going to be, the crowd's going to be split. There's going to be a ton of Steamboat fans, and Macho's recently just a babyface. I think they wanted. Valentine. Yeah, I think they just knew, like, if you look at how Macho's booked and who he faces throughout the night, there was never an opportunity that he was not going to get cheered in every one of those matches and be like looked at as the guy that the crowd really was behind. So yeah, this is a little unfortunate that we didn't get to see more from Steamboat here. But I thought this was, definitely one of the better matches of the evening. A couple other things. Jesse says something about Barry Blaustein in California likes the Steamboat here. And then this is when they got into the discussion of the external occipital protuberance. And he's like, what the hell did you just say, girl? And he says, the back of the head. And they had some fun with that one for a little bit. So a good night. And they show Donald Trump at ringside and Gorilla. What an individual! His hair still wasn't quite the hair that we know today for the Prez. Then we get Mean Gene backstage with the British Bulldogs and Coco Beware. They're talking about how Matilda the dog is the certified weasel hunter, and they have a 6-man tag later on with Bobby with these 3 against the Islanders and Bobby the Brain. So not too much here. This is kind of just like a little basic promo to set up their match for later on. Let's go to next tournament match. We got Butch Reed versus Macho Man. So here we go. Macho Man for the first time. And the one thing that I really thought was cool, that Jesse, you could tell that he loved Macho Man from Macho Man's heel days. He was always a big Macho Man guy. He was pushing him. And so he had a hard time rooting against the Macho Man throughout this show. He'd said right here, I've always been a Macho Man guy, before any of you. And Gurley even said true. So this was quick. Jason, this was just like get Randy out there the first time, a good heel to get him over, strong heel. And we didn't get a whole lot from Reed in the WWF. He did a lot better work before and after he came to the WWF. And this was his first of 4 matches in the night. What was cool is that in all 4 of the matches, him and Elizabeth have the different ring attire as they come on out. So what are your thoughts on this Savage versus Reed?
Yeah, all I could think about when I watched Butch Reed, my dad, when I was a little kid, Butch Reed used to do promos, and he had a little bit of a Muhammad Ali, kind of cocky, arrogant, and he would kiss his biceps. He would flex his muscles and then kiss his biceps. And my dad and his buddies used to, they'd get drunk at their poker game, and I'd be watching wrestling, and my dad would have me come over and do the Butch Reed impression for them, and they would crack up laughing. I'd be like, I got the 22-inch arms and the 22-inch neck, and then he starts kissing the biceps, and so that's my one Butch Reed story. Other than that, yeah, I mean I am a big Slick fan though, so anytime Slick shows up, I'm in.
You wouldn't buy a car from Slick? What did you think about this?
He's been in downtown Detroit all night. Yeah.
No, I think Randy Savage great in it. Butch Reed just kind of never was into him. Not a lot to say about him.
Yep. And then at the end of the match, Jesse, he was talking about how he thought, if you had to pick between Slick and Elizabeth as a manager, he would prefer Slick. But Butch Reed kind of the finish is set up when he's kind of distracted by Elizabeth, and then Jesse, for one of the few times I can ever remember him saying, I stand corrected. He said that maybe Elizabeth is the better manager, and maybe she does know what she's doing here, which is very rare. You didn't ever hear like Jesse or Bobby say that they were wrong, which I thought was kind of interesting. So we get backstage. Jesse, Bob Uecker continues to talk to trash about Jesse. They're talking to Vanna White, and it's Bobby Heenan and the Islanders who are back there. And so basically the whole story of this match is like Bobby the Brain versus the dog, right, Jason?
Yeah. Which I don't know, like that whole situation was, I thought, kind of corny, but Brain's outfit was great, and those are two really good tag teams too. I don't think because it was a 6-man, but to get Bobby in there, he's basically just kind of goes and squashes a guy that's already down, and I don't know that whole there's a couple spots in this pay-per-view, and the next one I believe is Rude and Jake the Snake. Like I usually skip those, because I know it's a draw, so there's no payoff if after you know what happens, and it's like I don't. This pay-per-view does drag in a few spots, and like for me, a 15-minute match between two guys that I actually like,
and expected more out of
it. Yeah, it's always a fast forward to me because I know Hulk and Andre are coming up too, or I think they do Warrior and Hercules and then Hulk and Andre, right?
Yeah. So Danny, we get the big man. Quick little big man schmoz match here, yeah. which is the one man gang and Bam Bam, the one man gang with Slick, Bam Bam with Oliver Humperdinck. They were pretty high on Bam Bam around this point. He had like a really big push at Survivor Series '87 when he was on the Hulk team, and you could tell they liked him, and he was always kind of trying to be the big man who could fly around and do kind of cartwheels and roll around here, but. This was like a really sloppy match. This only ended up going 256, and then we had a weird count out. So, I mean, this was definitely not a great match, Danny.
Didn't need to go longer than 256.
You're right.
Hated to see Bam Bam out in the first round. I loved him, and it was a sight to see 390 pounds from Asbury Park, New Jersey, just rolling and cartwheeling around the ring. I thought he was always one of the more entertaining big mans they've had in the sport. One-man gang goes over, and he's weird-looking, but what was up with Oliver Humperdinck's look? He's straight out of Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
It's like a mix of Tiny Tim and he's got a whole lot of things going on.
You're right. He was like the guy who lets you into the Wizard of Oz, at the door, who's letting you in. That's what he reminded me of. That's a great.
Why didn't you say so?
A horse of a different color. So that's a great call, Danny K. This is gonna bring us up to my favorite part of the show. This Hulk Hogan promo that we get coming up, which is just unbelievable. I went and found this full promo, really the end part of it. So he's doing the back, he's talking with Mean Gene, and he's basically like setting up everything that's happened with Andre over the last year. The first part of it's pretty basic, all my Hulkamaniacs, we're going to feel it, he's going through it. And then the last part where he says, yes, but if you look into their eyes, man, have you seen the fear in all those little Hulksters? They realize that when I get Andre the Giant cinched up in the launch position, when I slam him through the Trump Plaza, brother, from New York down to Tampa, Florida, the fault line is going to break off. And as Andre the Giant falls into the ocean, as my next two opponents fall to the ocean floor and I pit them, so will Donald Trump and all the Hulkamaniacs. Now it gets weird. But as Donald Trump hangs on to the top of the Trump Plaza with his family under his other arm, as they sink to the bottom of the sea tank. God, Donald Trump's a whole Hulkamaniac. He'll know enough to let go of his materialistic possessions, hang on to the wife and kid, dog paddle with his life all the way to safety. But Donald, if something happens, if you run out of gas and all those little Hulkamaniacs, just hang on to the largest back in the world and I'll dog paddle us, backstroke all of us to safety.
Gino, you better enter in an applause sound effect.
You know, I gotta think that the Hulkster was taking his vitamins before that.
My favorite part that I'm so glad you did was but Donald, like when he just stops on a dime and stares at the camera. But Donald, if all of a sudden, oh man,
yeah, that is an all-timer professional wrestling promo. If you've never seen it before, go onto YouTube and just watch it in its original glory.
With the backstroke motion too, when he's doing he backstrokes out of the promo off stage. He backstrokes right out. It's just hilarious. I mean, this was one of my all-time favorite Hulk Hogan promos. I kind of forgot that it was in this show, and then I was so excited.
Unlike WrestleMania 9, no racism.
No, you're right. We didn't get the racism from Hulk, which is already a plus. But
I have one noted racist comment later in the show.
I was going to say we get some Chico Santana a little later on that we get to talk about, no doubt about it. Up next, which, Jason, you kind of alluded to this a minute ago, this was a total bummer here. This next match is Rick Rude versus Jake the Snake. And, you look on paper, I love these two guys. They're great. But they have a match that goes 15 minutes. It's a time limit draw. And there it felt like 25 minutes. And there was at least 5 minutes of this match where Rick Rude had Jake in a chin lock. I mean, this was so slow. I wonder what the reasoning. I think it was just like the start of their feud, and a feud sparked out of this. But these two guys could have gotten so much more out of this.
Yeah, it's just like I said. I feel like part of the reason I skip it and don't is just because, like I said, I know the ending and the big one's coming up after that, and so. But yeah, it's just I did when we were kind of doing I did 2 watches leading up to this. One a couple weeks ago and one last night, and I did watch it last night. But it was it's just not their best work. But what's their motivation? They know they're They know they're going out ski, so who knows? I mean, but as you said, they're both clearly so capable of more. But I don't know. It was just it was kind of a lousy spot, I think, in general.
Better and quicker ways they could have got where they were going. A 15-minute draw, could have had a Jake win with the DQ and then Rude.
It's almost like
hates him after.
Go ahead, Danny. Sorry. Well, no, I was just gonna say it's almost like they wanted to have a draw somewhere on there, and this was the shortest time period because they have the DQs, they have a count out. I mean, they kind of have a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I didn't like 2 draws on the show either. Maybe getting a little 2 buys.
The other buys. I mean, and as we look back too, this show could have been like so much tighter if it was just 8. Instead of that 14, if it was just an 8-person bracket. But they wanted to do some of their things with Hogan and Andre.
Gotta get guys paydays too.
Yeah, they wanted to get some of these other guys on the shows. I mean, between this tournament and the Battle Royal, there were a ton of guys on these shows. There was actually a boring chant, which you didn't hear all that often. Like you didn't hear like chants from the crowd, like snarky, smartass chants from the crowd in the WWF all that often at this point. But
we got a Hogan chant later too.
Yeah, we did. There was just a little bit disappointing here on that one. So up next, we have Mean Gene backstage with Vanna White and the tournament brackets. He asks her about Bob Uecker. She says, who? And she makes her predictions. Well, she was okay in here. We saw in the first, I guess really like 10 years, and in particular the first like 4, WrestleMania was real celebrity heavy, and Vanna White was a pretty hot celebrity at this time.
Yeah. I mean, Mean Gene, I think, is great. He's always a little pervy whenever he gets around women, which is funny because he was one of those guys that was married for 50 years. Like if you watch Legends House, every time that Ashley woman comes in, like old Gene perks up. But I think he's from that generation that thought being creepy was charming. And there's like a whole generation that
Richard Dawson.
Yeah. So I don't know. The whole thing was, I don't know. I honestly skipped through all the between match stuff. It's just I've seen it. I've seen that all. There's nothing, there's nothing great for me on that stuff.
And then Danny K, we get our first Ultimate Warrior sighting at WrestleMania. I mean, this next match, it's the Ultimate Warrior versus Hercules. And Hercules was definitely a mainstay in WWF around this time for a while. He was in a couple different iterations, face, heel, he switched it up. He's in tag team for a while. I'll say this. Sloppy, another powerhouse match where we just have punches and clotheslines, and like a lot of them are like sloppy and not even really hitting. But this crowd was damn into the Warrior, and he hadn't even really done a whole hell of a lot yet in the WWF. So it's crazy that 2 years later, he's winning the main event and in WrestleMania 6, and he's the face of the company. But you could definitely tell early on, and I think that's why they kept him out of the tournament. Like, they didn't want him to win the tournament, and I don't think they wanted to get him beat in here.
No, and that makes sense. What surprises me about this match, watching it back, it's Ultimate Warrior versus Hercules. How did this go for more than 2 minutes, and how did Hercules get any offense in?
Oh, I know. Yeah. With a weird kind of finish.
Because Hercules is no slouch monsoon.
This wasn't happening, though, for sure. One of the 18 times Gorilla said it wasn't happening.
I love wrestling extravaganza of all time.
The electricity, you could cut it with a knife.
He said it at one point too, earlier on, and we didn't mention it. He said when Ricky's coming out with his son, he says, "You know what that youngster's thinking? Whoa, this is a happening!" Like
this is some kind of happening.
It's like the youngster thinks in WWE speak. He can't talk, but he's already thinking in WWE sound bites, which is just amazing.
I mean, maybe somebody who was a little older, living in the 80s, let me know. This is a happening? Is that something that people actually said then, or was that just WWF speak?
Yeah, I mean, this was. we got a lot of those great Gorilla lines throughout. It was a finish where they were in the corner. Hercules went for the full Nelson, and Warrior pushed off the corner. It looked like both of their shoulders were down. The ref counted them both down, and then the Warrior just kind of popped his shoulder up at the last minute. And like you said, this at this point, this was even long for a Warrior match, Jason. We normally just got like real big squashes, like we kind of saw him do with Honky Tonk at SummerSlam.
Yeah, he was still fine. I mean, you can tell even the shorts and the paint and the tassels, they're not nearly as bombastic as they were just a couple of years later. I mean, he was still, he was finding out who he was.
Now we get the big one. So they actually had an intermission at this point of the show, and then back from the intermission, it's the setup of the quarterfinal round.
Because Danny, tape 2 was halfway between this match, right? Like it was halfway during. When you had to VCR switch to tape 2, it was halfway during Hulk and Andre, I think.
Yeah.
They had you at that point. You were turning off during the Hogan Andre match.
Yeah. Yep. And that was, like we said, that was like the reason why this was my show too, as Danny mentioned. I think Jason and I talked about it a couple weeks ago, like just going into the video store, looking and seeing all those matches on the back of the tape, and seeing that big 2 tape that would open up in the middle was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get all of this for the same price. Like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So always was one that I would rent over and over and over again. And then now we get the whole setup to the Hogan Andre. I mean, we're basically going back a year and a half, even more. Hogan and Andre were good friends. They were top level baby faces. Then the Andre turn. We get the Piper's Pit segment. We get Andre linking up with Bobby the Brain. We go through WrestleMania 3 match. We go through I think Survivor Series, the Royal Rumble, and then they have the match at the main event, the double Hebners, all this stuff, which is a really great build. I mean, this was an awesome build up. And then Andre the Giant comes out. And it is Andre with DiBiase and Virgil, and then here comes Hulk with the real American music. And as always, when Hogan's out there, Hulk Hogan is the greatest pro athlete in the world today. Andre attacks immediately. They brawl before Hulk's even ripped off the T-shirt. Andre, and then one of those great Andre spots, he gets tied up in the ropes. Virgil and Ted DiBiase help him out. Andre, this is the thing you mentioned, Jason, too. They did a really great job with Andre because, I mean, I bet you he was gassed after this show just from walking back and forth. He could barely move around at this point. It's really crazy to think that he still has 2 more WrestleManias after this.
Yeah, this match got off to a fast start, too, by Andre and Hulk standards. Hulk ran in, and they kind of started going right at it. But, as you say, his level of – I mean, and like you said, you can't blame the guy. I mean, his body is ravaged at that point. But one of my favorite gags is after the match is over when DiBiase throws Virgil to the wolves and Jesse goes, "That's his job, guard the bodyguard." It's a great sleazy DiBiase move, and in a way, like, it's just part of their great build up to their match against each other. When Piper and him are when Piper and Virgil partner up down the road.
Yep. Danny, this is the Hulk Andre matches. None of them were ever going to be like that Mania 3 match with the bill and the circle and everything around it, but they were always huge. I mean, the main event before this was the most watched wrestling program in history. There were over 50% of households that were tuning into that. I mean, this is when wrestling was huge. These were the two biggest names in all of wrestling. So, more than anything, Danny, I mean, how surprised do you remember being when you watched this show for the first time that neither Hogan or Andre were moving on?
Absolutely baffled.
Me too. Oh, yeah.
How do you imagine a world where Hulk Hogan isn't the WWF champion? That just didn't make sense to me before I was 10 years old.
It was crazy to see, and just a lot going on. It was fun. It only ended up going 5 minutes and 13 seconds. And the finish was Hulk just blatantly bashes Andre right in front of the ref with a chair. He should have immediately been disqualified right there. But then they wait to let Andre hit him back with the chair so that way they could do the double DQ. And just mentioning about, like, Hulk was very heel throughout all of this show. He kind of, it was like a Hulk Hogan, Steve Austin, 97, where he's just banging people with chairs all throughout the show. But same kind of thing for you, Jason. Like, watching back, I remember I was like, who the hell is going to win this now?
Yeah. It's funny because obviously hindsight is 20/20, but like it all completely leads to Macho Man, the way everything breaks down. I mean, but of course at the time, you just couldn't imagine Hogan. And we even talked about that at WrestleMania 9, Gino. It was like, even Hogan coming up at the end, which we'll talk about, like, it was great, like, because he was the king. And even when he won at 9, like, looking back now, you realize, oh God, his ego and this and that and the other. But at the time, I still remember being like, hell yeah, the Hulk's got to win.
I wanted it.
Let me rewind. Let me step in on 9 quickly. I was there live, and hearing Hulk's music and seeing him win the title at the last second was crazy for it. The crowd was crazy for it. He was still, and it's always going to be, at least for another 10, 15 years after that, the biggest name in professional wrestling.
Humble brag on being there.
When The Rock came around, there was no one who could conceivably challenge that.
Yeah.
Danny Kaye, I know, I'm jealous getting to be there at Caesar's Palace at the Roman Coliseum
at the world's biggest yoga party.
Yeah, JR's first show.
Hanging from the rafters, if there were rafters.
Yeah, Danny, the good thing about being there was you did not have to listen to the Macho Man
on commentary, who just was so awful, especially on that show. Oh yeah,
wrestling for winning the title a year before, and then on commentary at 9.
I know, and then the next year in the Falls Count Anywhere with Crush. What a weird a few years there for the Macho. So we get the double DQ. So that means that up next it's going to be DiBiase versus Don Morocco, and the winner of that match is going to get a bye and go to the finals of the tournament. So we now have an interview in the backstage. It's Mean Gene talking to Randy Savage, and Randy's starting to turn real like white meat babyface now. Hulk Hogan was a cheated man, not a defeated man, and he basically just says, now I'm going to do it. I'm one half of the Mega Powers, and I'm going to go all the way. Yeah, thumbs up. Quarterfinal round, Ted DiBiase versus Don Morocco. The one thing I noticed immediately about this match, Jason, was how weird it was to see DiBiase come out to the ring alone.
Alone, yeah. And he has no music, and it's very, like, lacking in any kind of. I mean, it literally was like, oh, here comes Ted DiBiase. Yeah, it's a weird moment. I mean, coming out with no music in general seems strange. I mean, obviously it wouldn't happen now, but that was that period where most of the guys, a good chunk of the guys had music, and obviously Morocco had that the big music that superstar Billy Graham had. So I mean, they were very contrasted in coming out.
And Danny
DiBiase looks annoyed that he's coming out. Like, if you watch him, he looks pissed that he's there because obviously his guy just. His meal ticket just lost, even though later on they say that was the plan.
And so Andre can't come out with DiBiase because he just had his match with Hogan right before, so he's probably recovering. Virgil got slammed on the floor, so he can't come out. So DiBiase is alone, and this went 5 minutes. DiBiase was like one of those guys where we don't even, he's such a great heel. We all don't even realize when we're kids what a great worker he is and how good he is in the ring. Danny, I love the finish of this match. It was what I think Steve Austin would use sometimes as his finisher when he was stunning Steve, and they called it the stun gun, where he kind of dropped Morocco throat first over the top rope. He gets the pin at 5 minutes and 44 seconds.
Just a tangent. My kind of thing with Morocco at this one, it was kind of my first exposure ever to superstar Billy Graham as well. And I remember hearing Jesse Ventura mentioning that he was a former world champion, and back then you couldn't go onto the network or find any old stuff anywhere. But eventually got to learn more about superstar Billy Graham and kind of got what they were trying to do with him in Morocco. But that didn't come for me until years and years later. So I was kind of flying blind the first 7-8 years of watching this show. And he was a WWF champion in '78. Nowadays, if you're champ 10 years ago, you're probably main eventing Mania this year.
You're right, and getting a huge payday, especially if it's a Saudi Arabia show. So yeah, this was, nothing crazy. It was just so weird because you just never saw DiBiase like winning clean, even, which I think was it was good for them to do, just to kind of put him over as like he's still like top quality. Even without Andre and Virgil, like he's still capable of winning a match, which I thought was kind of a good story as they continued throughout the show. We got Bob Uecker. He did a ton of interviews. He was basically like the interviewer throughout this entire show. Normally we wouldn't see a celebrity get like that many interviews. He must have had like 6 or 7 different backstage interviews. He's talking with Demolition and Mr. Fuji. He says something about sushi too at one point. And then we get, this was also kind of weird, Jason, which was like made this show obviously go a little longer. But these were the things that I kind of liked, that they would make the guys who had a bye come out to the ring and raise their hand for the bye.
Well, the thing is no people in the arena. It's not like they had a scoreboard up, right? So it is a good reminder.
Great point.
At the time to like, oh yeah, I forgot the one man gang has a bye.
Yeah, he's still in the mix, so that's a good point. No big jumbotron type stuff. We're all looking at the brackets, so that's key. They have to be able to keep telling the story for the fans in the audience. So one man gang gets his hand raised. He's into the semifinals because of that Roberts Rude draw a little earlier in the night. Next up, we get Greg Valentine versus Randy Macho Man Savage, and since this is match 2 for Macho Man, Danny K, we've got a new outfit for Macho Man and Elizabeth, and Gorilla lets us know that there's going to be lots of elbows in this match. Both guys known for their elbowing.
Two of the masters of the elbow in this one, and mentioned earlier, watching with Mrs. Danny K the other night, and she's noticing the wardrobe changes, especially on Elizabeth for each one, and how classy she is. So, that's definitely on a not so subtle level, just kind of elevating him the further he goes each time.
Jason, where were you with this one?
I don't know. Like I said, the middle part of the show drags a little bit for me, from a viewing standpoint, because it is so long, and I was not a big Valentine fan. So I will say one thing I noticed is like one of the weakest. The least payoff for the most energy moves is the double axe handle off the top rope when a guy's standing. Like they usually just drape their hands around the top of the guy's head. They obviously aren't nailing the guy, but it just seems like a lot of work to kind of punch the guy on top of the head.
Which you could have just done from right there.
With actually more, more momentum with just turning your hips.
Which is funny, actually. There's a moment in the match, which you might have thought of this subconsciously even, where Jesse and Gorilla are debating that. And when the Hammer goes up the top rope to do like a double axe handle off the top, and Gorilla says, I don't know if that was worth it. And Jesse says, oh, absolutely. Did you see the force that he came down with? And they're kind of going back and forth on that.
Well, and I think Macho comes down, Hammer punches him, but Macho still hits him, and Hammer does kind of his Ric Flair fall where he just face plants,
Yeah.
Hammer does do a good fall. Like he'll do that where he's standing, looks fine, and then he just drops.
Yeah, and then Danny, you know what? I did like the match was okay. I mean, with these two guys, if these two guys had a 15-minute match, it would obviously be a lot better if it wasn't in a tournament situation like this. But I really did like the finish. I thought anytime someone would go for like the figure four and you rolled them up in a small package, it seemed very believable.
No, absolutely, and just one of the dangers of the figure four. And Macho, he didn't have any 4 or 5 star matches this year, but he didn't need to get himself over.
Yep, that was the key. This was about building the Macho Man here, and now we are up to Mean Gene talking to Vanna about the ongoing Bob Uecker storyline. They go over the next set of matches, so we're really down to 3. It's Macho Man Randy Savage against the One Man Gang. The winner of that will meet Ted DiBiase in the finals. We now get the IC title match that we were talking about a couple different times throughout the show with the Honky Tonk Mat with Jimmy Hart and Peggy Sue versus Brutus Beefcake. Peggy Sue is really Sherry Martel.
Is she really? I didn't know that one.
Yeah,
okay.
That's Sherry. Sherry playing Peggy Sue.
Jesse gives her a big time.
Yep.
She's always very positive. She really loves the Honky Tonk Man.
Yep.
Okay.
Which I think so for the people who knew that it was Sherry, that was kind of like a nice inside joke. And then Jesse always has to say hello to Terry, Tyrell, and Jade back in Minnesota.
I got that noted, Gino. I think the first one was WrestleMania 3.
Yep.
And then it was every year after that. And wife and kids for those who don't know.
So, Danny, this was basically like your typical honky match, right? We get lots of honky cheating with Jimmy Hart kind of begging off, and then he's, there like double teaming Brutus. And you mentioned he's such a great heel. He's so great at begging off. And the finish of this match was, a lot of the matches had bad finishes. This was just like a total Honky Tonk Man finish, though, right? Like he's out cold in the middle of the ring, but Jimmy Hart saves him by nailing the ref with the megaphone.
And the ref is dead.
And you'd think at one of these points, would lead to a Honky Tonk Man, pay off in a steel cage match or something where the DQ is not going to save him. It never did.
No.
Honky just got to honky it up. The ultimate payoff, though, made it worth it.
Yeah. It did when we saw Warrior squash him a little later on this year. So, that's what happens. Like, it looks like Beefcake is about to win the Intercontinental Championship. He's got Honky in the sleeper. He's about to fall asleep. And Jimmy Hart just is like, he realizes that Honky's about to lose, and he just decks the ref in the back of the head with the megaphone. And as Jason mentioned, referee is just out. I mean, he's not moving. They're both out. In fact, Peggy Sue Sherry has to come and pour water on Honky Tonk's face just to revive him. But we get the fun spot when they're down, when the ref is down and when Honky's down, where Jimmy Hart goes and steals the bag of Brutus's clippers, and Brutus gets him back, and then he follows he follows Jimmy Hart under the ring, and Jesse says, "He's not gonna cut his hair under the ring, is he?" and then we get the payoff, which we always wanted, Jason. We get Jimmy Hart's hair cut. Which he seemed to get his hair cut all the damn time, right?
My favorite random little thing about this is Gorilla constantly referring to Jimmy Hart as the Colonel.
Oh yeah,
because Colonel Tom Parker was Elvis's manager, and so Jimmy became Colonel Jimmy Hart.
That's great. Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know why it makes me laugh, because like he's like the least Colonel looking guy on the planet. First of all, I mean, he's such a little weasel, but it's a fun spot at the end. I always love the haircut thing, and I remember, for Jimmy, it went on. I remember him complaining about it because he had that long kind of mullet, and Brutus cut off a lot of hair. Like you can see when he gets up, like it is not long anymore. Like he really went to work on it.
Yeah, this is, like we said, Danny, like with the Brutus matches, you're never going to get like 5-star classic, but they're fun. I don't ever mind rewatching them. They're a good time. They're never too long. They always have some fun spots with the sleeper, and then after the match you're going to get at least a tease with the shears.
No, you always got what you paid for with Brutus Beefcake, and until his later days in WCW as the Butcher or the Booty Man, I'll wash my hands on that. But Brutus the Barber, one of my favorite characters, WWF in this era.
Yeah, and you know what? That was a good. I'm glad you mentioned that. This match, these were two of the best characters. These guys were not ring generals, but that wasn't what we needed from them. We wanted them to play their roles as, Elvis impersonator, cheap heel, and Brutus the Barber, great mid-card babyface, friend of Hulk Hogan, who's going to get the haircut afterwards. So yeah, these guys were two of the really good characters, especially in this era of WWF.
Gino, I really love that Honky could never trouble himself to actually learn guitar.
No.
Like, as someone who plays guitar, like I watch now, and he obviously traveled with a guitar, at every moment. And whenever he's like starts strumming it, like he doesn't even bother to play a chord.
Two chords.
He just
learn two or three chords.
Learn a G and a C, and you'll look like you at least know what you're doing. And he couldn't do it. Like he never would. One last thing too about the Beefcake match. I love Jesse's, because Beefcake's outfit was pretty aggressive, and and he goes, "Brutus looks like he survived a nuclear explosion."
That was great. Yeah, and I think earlier in the night, Mean Gene looked at him and said, "What a package!" But Brother Brew and I, making us laugh like always. Up next, we get the infamous clip that I think a lot of every wrestling fan, I'm sure, has seen at one point, and the one that they show all the time when they show the clips from old WrestleManias. It's Bob Uecker, and Andre comes over, and you know what? Andre is talking, but he didn't really talk a whole lot, and this was one of his longer heel promos. Yeah, it was good. It was good. Uecker can't find Vanna, but then Andre comes out. And basically, after Andre kind of just says, I was paid off by DiBiase to get Hogan out of the match. Hogan, you're not the champ, so I won, kind of a thing. And Andre's still going with the I'm undefeated, even though we've seen him lose now multiple times. But it was great. And then Uecker says to him, "How about getting your foot off my shoulder?" And then Andre chokes Uecker, and he puts his big hands around Uecker's neck. And I mean, Uecker sold this thing so great, Jason.
Yeah, it's a GIF now. Like, if you search Andre the Giant GIF, you get the one where he's scared of the snake and he's saying no, and then you get him shaking Bob Uecker's head, and it's one of those great examples of Andre's hands, because Uecker was a professional athlete. It's not like he's Mean Gene. He's not a tiny guy. And I was, when we were talking about Uecker earlier, I was forgetting that this was right in the peak of the less filling, great taste commercials. It was also during Mr. Belvedere. Uecker was a mainstream star at this point. He wasn't just a goofy baseball guy. So
yeah.
It's actually weirdly, because Andre always had the brain for his promos. So he never had to do them. And this one, he actually had a little bit of a story and a flow. Like, it was good for Andre standards.
What'd you think, Danny?
I never knew Uecker was a baseball guy back at this time. I just knew that I saw him on Mr. Belvedere sometimes. But,
which it's funny, and I was watching this show over the last couple days. I watched it a few different times through the last week or two, and Stephanie would always my girlfriend Stephanie would always kind of come in through one of the Macho Man's entrances and say, "The graduation song." And it's funny that you said that, Danny, because about Bob Uecker, to me, before I knew it was the graduation song, it was Macho Man's song.
It's
I remember
Man's song,
and I remember being actually hearing it at graduation. When I'm 4 or 5 years old, or whenever I go to a graduation, and going why the hell are they playing Macho Man's music? Are they big wrestling fans here? This doesn't make any sense to me. So it's funny, the way backwards you learn things. And to me, this is always a Macho Man's song. It's not the graduation song, but just iconic moment. One of those ones that when you literally get a snapshot of what is WrestleMania and what Vince McMahon wanted WrestleMania to be, with the mixing of the celebrity and the wrestler and the mainstream, it was exactly what that Andre choking Uecker moment was. That was what Vince McMahon dreamed up, and it was really good. It was a lot of fun. As we get set for our next match, it is the Islanders and Bobby the Brain Heenan versus the British Bulldog and Coco Beware. And when Bobby comes out, he is wearing a dog handler's jacket to protect himself. These are the Islanders with Tama.
Haku and Tama, yeah.
Yeah, Haku and Tama, who was better known as the Tonga Kid. Haku was also Ming when he went to WCW. and they're all related with Rikishi and Umaga and all of them. And this was, 6-man tag, the Bulldogs and Coco. We kind of talked about it a few times throughout the show, how the story of this was the Matilda like dog napping and them trying to get the revenge on Bobby the Brain Heenan, who's wearing that big dog handler's jacket. And you know what, Danny? I will say one of the reasons why I really, really love Bobby too is he was Weasley and he was a great heel, but whenever he would get in the ring in a situation like this, or, there was one with the Red Rooster when he's in a match, he bumped like crazy. He would take any bump, and that's a bummer because like later on, that's kind of why he stopped being a manager, because he had those neck problems and he kind of felt like he didn't want to not let the baby faces get their comeuppance on him. But man, the guy was a ton of fun when he would be in the ring.
Yeah, throw himself into it, but hard to watch, knowing how he ended up from it later in his life.
Yeah, it was, and Jason, this was great. And then whenever they would have a lot of times when they would do the manager in like a 6-man tag or like a non like main roster wrestler, we saw this I think with Dangerous Danny Davis even the year before. With like
Mr.
kind of
Fuji
like
had one of these a couple years later too.
Yeah, too. They just kind of placed him on top and he wins. It seemed like they liked doing it, so it was great to keep the story going that Bobby the Brain gets the win and Jesse just loves the fact that Heenan picks up the victory.
Yeah, it's Bobby's just awesome. And like I said, I think the match gets handicapped a little in the sense because they do have to. Obviously Bobby's not going to go out there and do wrestling moves full-fledged, so he comes out and squashes a couple times, runs right out, and then they finally do get to hit him a few times, but
they have to work around him. You're
yeah,
right.
Yeah, and I think sometimes that slows the match down. The other thing is, the whole angle is whether or not the dog is going to get to Heenan, and then when it finally does afterwards, like the dog is like so confused and doesn't actually want to bite him. Like Davey's like literally dropping the dog on top of him.
I know.
And they're like, he's going after Heenan. She's going after Heenan. And it's like, no, she's like laying on him and wanting to kiss him. Yeah. Like it's really funny.
Dogs at WrestleMania just never worked.
Yeah. No, good call on that one.
And then Jesse, by the way, we always talk about the early days racism. Jesse says that Bobby looks like a Chinaman.
Oh, yeah.
Like what a crazy thing to
just say. I know. Yeah. It's like when you hear some of those things are like piercing nowadays, and I always try to make the notes of them. This wasn't much, as you mentioned. Like it was more the story. Like just like an Islanders British Bulldogs. Like when they had their matches, they could go. If you get 15 or 20 minutes of those guys going at it, and this was definitely like the end of the Dynamite Kid. You even saw him just for a few minutes, like right at the beginning of the match. He's so quick, he's so fast, like he can go. He was, like the guy that Bret Hart looked up to and learned a lot from, and some of those types. And always sad that he didn't get the opportunity to get like more of a run, because he was just decimated by injury.
And Haku, of course, always thought of like as real life the baddest mofo ever, right?
Yeah, the badass.
Yeah,
he was the one that they wanted to bring with and all the guys backstage would always want to bring to fight the other guys. So when like Haku was on WWF side, they would want him to bring to fight the NWA guys, and then vice versa. In WCW, they'd want him to bring to fight the WWF guys. He was one of those tough guys backstage. And we get up to. We'd always have a spot where Jesse gets announced. Yeah. And Danny, you know what? Like, this was another one where just watching when I'm young, I don't realize how much of a movie star Jesse is at this point. Like, he's in some actually decent movies, and he, I kind of forget that he was a big heel, 3 or 4 years before this, but man, the crowd loved him. They were going absolutely crazy for him when he jumped up on the announce table.
Yeah, getting his due, and he was thinking of coming out of retirement,
and also wearing.
He stole there that he could.
It reminded me that a lot of those guys wore spandex in their day-to-day life.
Yeah, it was fun. Jesse was just such a great staple of these first 6 years of WrestleMania. Like, it's just hearing his voice gives me that like warm, fuzzy feeling inside. Then we get Ted DiBiase getting his bye into the finals. He comes out, he gets his hand raised earlier, and it's the semifinals time with Macho Man and Elizabeth. They're now out in another different outfit. They're wearing black here, And this match only goes about 4 minutes, but there's a funny line like right at the beginning of the match that I loved, where Gorilla says, Jesse's talking about how Randy's had to wrestle an extra match, whether it's gonna against the one man gang, and then if he wins, he's gonna have to wrestle an extra match against DiBiase. And Gorilla says it's because Macho has a chance to win because he has heart, and Jesse goes, Bret Hart, which was just so stupid, but just hilarious, like Jesse just being a smartass right away with him. And they were playing, Jason, like they're playing this whole, Macho Man has had to wrestle the extra match. Yeah. The big man got the bye, so he's obviously the heavy favorite here, and Macho's got to work to get by this guy.
But can you imagine from a booking standpoint, like, was there ever going to be a DiBiase gang final?
I know, right?
Like, nobody would stay for that. Like, everybody would go home. And like, looking back, it's like, well, how? I mean, come on. I mean, they were never gonna put the gang at the feature race or feature event in WrestleMania. So I suppose that it seemed
match at work though, because you've got Savage in against a guy twice his size. And
but yeah. I guess like I said, I hate when people look at wrestling from a booker angle, but like that one to me kind of does jump out as like, of course they're not having a gang DiBiase, but it's true. I mean, those 400, 500 pound guys, theoretically you'd think they would just squash a lot of these little guys, but and then he got DQ'd, right? The gang,
which was
trying to stab him with
with a cane.
A cane,
he's a really dumb guy.
So stupid, right? And it's like you would think this was one of the finishes that I did it. I if you're trying to get Macho over, that's fine. Like have maybe Slick has the cane, or maybe like Macho's getting beat up. What I didn't like about this was like after the match, Macho still got the better of the gang, right? And then he walks out on his own. So if you're gonna tell the story that Macho is like beaten up again, like don't let him get over on them at the end of the match. Like have Macho have to be like wheeled out or helped out, as like, Slick and the gang are celebrating as they walk out, because it didn't make a whole lot of sense that there's a DQ and then after Macho still is able to like, get his double axe handle and the gang falls on top of Slick. It just seemed a little bit like those two didn't go together. And I think one of the only maybe like slight mistakes on the night building Macho, even it didn't hurt him any, but maybe it just could have been a little different there. But yeah, just a 4-minute match, nothing crazy, just really stupid though. Like if you're in a tournament where you're one match away from winning the title, you're going to bring a cane and just beat on someone right in front of the ref. Just doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense there. Nonetheless, Macho gets the win. So it's Macho versus DiBiase, which we actually had on this match on the main event, Saturday night's main event, right before this pay-per-view in March. And they had a match where DiBiase ends up winning by countout because, everybody's teaming up on Savage, and then Hogan comes out for the save and he helps him. And that's kind of starting the forming of the Mega Powers. We now go backstage. It is a little more Mean Gene and Vanna White in the tournament brackets. The finals are set. Vanna gets ready to walk out to the ring because she's going to get introduced for the main event coming up soon. And then it's tag team titles time. We get the WWF version of the LOD with Demolition wearing their S&M outfits. They're taking on Strike Force, which is Tito Santana and Rick Martel. And their music, the Tito Santana Strike Force music, it is so great 80s. It is just like, to me, that is the 80s, that song, their music there.
Have you ever listened to the two albums that the WWF put out in the 80s, a Wrestling Album and Wrestling Album 2 Pile Driver?
Pile Driver was amazing. They do the music video Pile Driver at the end of one of the Saturday night main events leading up to this, which is just unbelievable. But you know what? Demolition was really over at this time, and they're going to turn face in not too long. But they were, as I mentioned, Jason, they were kind of the WWF's like answer to what the LOD was on the other side.
I actually thought Demolition was kind of cool, and part of that might have been because I didn't follow the other side, so I didn't really know about LOD at this point. And so to me, these guys were kind of, it's funny, like Shawn Michaels, same thing. Like the outfits, looking back now, they're like very like S&M and weird, but at the time they looked kind of badass and tough.
They were
right?
badass.
Like, yeah, I mean, Michael, Some of his early boy toy outfits are really bad.
Going back earlier, also the learning things in reverse. When I first saw the Legion of Doom, I thought they were the Demolition knockoff.
You're right. I kind of did too, because that's what I knew Demolition first. It's so funny, and they have some badass music. When their music starts, Demolition, and they come down. Here comes the axe.
Yeah, great
Here
music.
comes the smasher, like walking disaster. That was a real fun entrance song when they came down. And this was, your typical bigger guys, Demolition, against the quicker tag team with, Tito. We talk about, he's just such a mainstay in WWF through all these years, and you know what we're gonna get in a Tito match, Jason. We're gonna get some Chico talk.
Yeah,
Chico
my favorite thing that
the flying tamale.
Yeah, I mean he never gives up on that. But my favorite little thing that Jesse does once in a while is whenever Joey Morella's doing a match, he always tries to take a shot at him. And
Gorilla.
It's funny because at the time you don't know he's Gorilla's son. No. But now looking back, you're like, how funny is that? Like he's just busting the kid's balls just because his dad's sitting right next to him. And they can't, he can't comment on it other than like, oh, I thought he was in good position.
Yeah, he does. He just tries to take an extra shot there. So we get Danny, we get Jesse's two comments that were great here was early on when Demolition got the advantage over Tito Santana. He says, Chico wants to be back in Tijuana selling tacos right now. And then we get one of those Gorilla, will you stop me? Like, he didn't do that. And then the other one was, he comes with I think one of the flying elbows that you were just mentioning, or the flying forearm, and he says, Chico learned that move in the Mexican Football League.
The MFL.
Which was just I'm just every time it's Jesse and Tito comes out, I'm just waiting for the first Chico, and you could see that they would have a lot of fun, Gorilla and Jesse, because they would kind of go like Jesse would say Chico every time Gorilla said Tito.
Although when you're a kid and you're watching this, do you even get what Chico means, or do you think his name is also Chico?
Yeah.
Like sometimes they call Gorilla Gino.
Yeah. Oh, this was just fun stuff. At the end of the match, we get another one of these, manager involved kind of cheap finishes where the referee's distracted when it looks like the good guys, the Strike Force, are about to win. Rick Martel has the Boston Crab, which was one of my favorite moves. I love the Boston Crab. He's got it locked in, and they use the cane, another cane spot from behind to hit him. They get the pin, and we have our new tag team champions at 8:02. Also, I'm sure you guys, realized too, is just sad hearing the Fink, right? Like throughout the show with what a great job he does and all the announcements after he just passed the other day, but he got to get his big new announcement here for Demolition.
And the next match.
Yeah. Which was a real classic. So yeah, I mean, a lot of fun with this one. Tito's complaining afterwards to the ref. So far.
And this also set up, kind of a long, slow feud with Tito and Rick Martel. Also, speaking of those payoffs,
you're right.
Who looked a lot alike. I think Jesse even mentions that he couldn't tell who was who. Like they had the same kind of long mulletish haircut and same tan and everything.
Yeah, Rick.
Similar builds too. I mean,
he was one that he doesn't get talked about with like the really good WWF wrestlers, and he was like a main eventer before coming to the WWF, and then he was in some tag teams for a while. They threw him around in a few different tag teams iterations.
Tom Zink.
Yeah, with Tom Zink, the Can-Am Express, I think, and he had like one of the real great underrated runs as the Model, which was it's a great character. But you hit that one, Danny. This was kind of the start of a long overarching storyline with the Strike Force as they kind of would split up a little bit later.
Remember the Model's button that said "Yes, I am a model."
With his arrogance that he would spray in everyone's face.
Which, by the way, if you sprayed arrogance in somebody's eyes, it was worse than salt. I mean, they were dead. Yeah. But I just thought that pin was so funny. Yes, I'm a model.
Yes, I am a model. So we have been 15 matches down now so far, and we're getting set for the big one. Now it's the finals of the tournament. Howard Finkel introduces Robin Leach of Lifestyles of the Rich and the Famous. They present it's kind of cool. He's walking down the aisle with the belt, and the crowd is like reaching out to touch the belt like it's holy. You know, like a lot of the people are like they're reaching out just to get a little touch of that World Heavyweight Championship belt. It was kind of cool to see how, you know, wrestling was thought of at this point too, because everybody was so into it. Everybody was like playing along with the game. You know what I mean? Like everyone's going along with the show. And then we get, you know, the introduction of the celebrities. So Robin Leach, then Bob Uecker comes out. He's the guest ring announcer, and he introduces guest timekeeper Vanna White. And Uecker then introduces DiBiase. I kind of like what he said. DiBiase accompanying himself. No, he's got the big man, Andre the Giant, with him. Just kind of goofy, but it's like I always remember that little like line because I've watched the show so many times. And I
wonder how Finkel felt about having to give up the
big match, right?
Yeah. Because he didn't get to do Hogan Andre. He didn't get to do this one. Like I always think about like Mountaineer used to bring in Dave Johnson to call the West Virginia Derby.
Delta would do that too a lot of times on big nights. And
I think Charlestown has done it before. And like you know, you work all year, you do all the travel and all the work, and then the biggest spot you get bounced. Like I always thought that kind of stuff. And Finkel's better than Uecker. Like I mean, so it's I don't know. I always wondered. I mean, I'm sure he was always a team player, but you know.
And Danny, we get one of the right off the bat when this match starts. Before the match starts, you mentioned we get the payoff from the Uecker storyline. He's chasing around. He's looking for Vanna all night. He gave that awful line right before this where he mentions Vance White, and it was like he blew the punch line, but he still is able to get the hug, get the kiss afterwards. So that to me, that's kind of what was really fun about it. We don't get that in a lot of WrestleManias because I mean you can't really have like a sustained storyline throughout the card. This is more of something that happened in like Monday Night Raws for a while, you know, with like Austin. But I loved that we had some stories all throughout the card. Obviously the Macho Man and then kind of the underlying one with Uecker.
I love that they knew how to use their celebrities back then for WrestleMania.
Yes, they did.
Are you referring to anything that happened recently, Danny? The Tampa Bay Buccaneers new 24/7 champions.
I love that WWE released a statement. They were like, Gronkowski is the 24/7 champion. He might be pinned in the end zone by Tom Brady, you know, something like that, which just hilarious. But great use of the celebrities here. They got the good. This was the rub that Vince wanted, you know, from all of them, and he got it with especially with Uecker, who, you know, this wasn't as good as he was in Mania 3, but he still was a lot of fun here. And we get set for DiBiase, Randy Savage, and even with these guys tired, you can tell right away that they're like two of the better workers. You know, this match is definitely going to be better than a lot of the matches we've seen all throughout the night. And what had happened in this match is what had been happening over the last few months to build up the Mega Power storyline. Macho Man would be in a match, and then it was initially the Honky Tonk and the Hart Foundation actually that came out and were beating him up, and then Elizabeth went back and she got Hulk Hogan, who came out and made the save. And so early in the match, every time Macho Man's trying to get the advantage, there's Andre. Andre's on the outside of the ring. Andre's doing something. Andre's getting involved. And so Elizabeth has to run back and get Hulk Hogan to come on out and help Macho Man. And then we just this is a blast. You know, this is like another one of those things that's just like, it's a fun, like from the announcing, the beginning of the celebrities getting announced to the very end when Macho has his hand raised. It's like a 15 minutes of real fun. Like I really love this like whole main event thing, Jason.
Yeah, it was action packed. It was just a good match, and I mean the crowd like looks for Hogan like the first thing, right? Like and so I don't know. I mean, I don't know why everybody was like, I don't know why it was so obvious, but you know, I guess looking back, of course, it was obvious. But I mean, Hogan couldn't let anybody have like that, you know, big thing. But I'm guessing that Hogan was just so huge and so over. They wanted everybody to think, hey, if Hogan's down with this, we're down with this kind of thing.
The rub, yeah, he was giving him the rub, the Hogan rub for sure. And then Danny, we get you know. Like schmoz all over, and you know, Andre getting involved, Hogan getting involved, and the finish is basically Hogan just blasting DiBiase in the back with a chair when the ref's not looking. He goes down. Macho goes up for the elbow. He hits an awesome elbow drop here. He's got just a little extra spring in his step because he knows. I loved throughout the match, too, in the first one, like the way he covered. You could tell Macho like knew he was going to win the title because he was just bouncy all night long. His energy was amazing. And I mean, this is fun. And then this sets up, a storyline for a while where we've got, still on the Mega Bucks against the Mega Powers with Andre and DiBiase versus Hogan and Savage. And Danny, this was actually like the start of what would lead to the main event of WrestleMania 5 and was, this was like one of the most lucrative time periods in the history of the WWF. They're about to come upon like one of their greatest storylines where Macho and Hulk turn on each other and they main event 5. This was just a blast. And like thinking about how like these 2 or 3 years are kind of all connected, it's a ton of fun. It's like much different than the way the wrestling is presented nowadays.
No, absolutely. Like the only time I can really think of the past decade where they really planned a story out a year in advance is that John Cena Rock match a year before for WrestleMania. And all they did there is they announced it one night and then put it on hold for 10 months.
Yeah.
The Mega Powers, they would carry every WWF pay-per-view from WrestleMania 4 all the way up until, Survivor Series 89, a year and a half later. That was their bread and butter. And then even going further, you don't get the full final payoff until you have Savage and Elizabeth reunite WrestleMania 7 3 years down the line.
Yep. It was
it's sometimes it is Shakespeare.
It really is. It is. We give them a hard time for a lot of things that are goofy, but this was there's not many people who could be cynical about the storyline and what was moving forward. And it was great because I believe at this time, like the reason why Hulk didn't win this was because Hulk was going to film No Holds Barred right after this. He was going to go film a movie, so he wasn't going to be around all the time. So what they were able to do was, okay, we can have Macho and DiBiase kind of be the main event and sell the tickets for the house shows, and that can be a storyline for a while. And then Hulk can kind of show up whenever he can and be in their corner, and that's what they did for a bit until we got to it was Survivor Series where we started to see a little crack, and then it was Royal Rumble where we started to see a little crack, and then they turned on each other in the main event, and there was lust in your eyes, Hogan, which we got a year later, and I mean this was a blast. If you're someone who likes the Macho Man, this is a show that you'll love because it made him a star. Mm. And by the end of the night, I remember thinking like, man, yeah, this guy just had it. He had all of it. Ton of fun. We get the big posing at the end. And as you mentioned, Jason, we're never going to get a show to go off without Hogan getting some of his poses out.
He's giving the people what they want. Jesse's like, what? By what? Posing? I can pose. One thing you mentioned, I think you actually kind of teased this, Gino, earlier, but like Macho really was the only quote unquote good guy that Jesse ever really gave it up for. Mm-hmm. And I mean, he really kind of broke the character in terms of that. And I wanted to mention one more thing from the Macho DiBiase match. When Macho goes up for that final elbow, Hogan had kind of knocked him out, so you knew he was out for the count. The flash bulbs that go off when Macho's in the air, it's unbelievable because he misses the elbow earlier, but I think because he's not, DiBiase is down and knocked out from Hogan. I forget what he hit. What does he hit him with a chair or what? I'm spacing. Yeah,
it's a chair. Yeah,
but like it's almost like everybody knew. Okay, this is the final spot, and it's like flashbulb city that goes off when he's in midair. And I was thinking about I wonder if like on eBay you can find some of those pictures because it has to be an amazing shot of him midair. Getting ready to drop that elbow.
Danny, what are some of your final thoughts of this show?
I think of every show I've ever seen, just from start to finish in WWF wrestling pay-per-view history. I've never seen one that tells a more cohesive, better story than WrestleMania 4 does. Any individual piece of it might be slow, might not be much, but when you view it as the whole, it's so much more than the sum of its parts, and that's what makes it an all-timer for me, and always will.
That is very, very well said. There are, this was I think, we look back now and we didn't really know what like WrestleMania moments were, but when you look at this show, you get a good amount of them, right? Obviously with Hogan winning, or with Savage winning, he gets his moment, but he gets, the celebrating in the ring with Hogan after. We get the Bret Hart moment right at the very beginning, which is like a WrestleMania moment, in the Battle Royal. We get some of the like real creative finishes. Andre gets, this is, like one of his real last times to shine in the WWF, because we don't really see Andre a whole lot in the main event picture after this. He just can't do much. So just a lot of fun again. You look back, and if you looked at each of these matches individually, just like you said, Danny, and not like the sum of the whole of the parts, it would be completely different. But you can't do that, and you shouldn't do that when you're watching WrestleMania 4. It's about the story. It's about the ascent of the Macho Man, him becoming a major player and one of the all-time WWF greats. And it's about that like year-long storyline that we get between Hogan and Miss Elizabeth and the Macho Man. So a lot of fun. I'm actually surprised we got through this pretty quick. I think because a lot of the matches we talk about multiple guys, a couple times. We already hit on a lot of things about them. But yeah, again, like anything else to close it out with, Jason, before we get going?
No, I think I liked what Danny said at the end, and I kind of echo what I said earlier, just in the sense that it's such an identifiable WrestleMania because of the tournament, and it is funny to watch it in regards to Trump now, because obviously of who he is, and so it's just strange, like, wow, that guy's the president of the United States.
Yeah.
And I think is it the first year or the second year? There's some other guy that's rich there I think it's the WrestleMania 5. Like Trump brings one of his rich buddies the next year, and DiBiase's talking about how he's like, oh, I'm good friends with that guy. He just made the biggest deal of all time, or something like that.
And Jesse, I can't remember which one it is. At one of the events, Jesse actually goes up to interview him. And he says, Mr. Trump, I'm thinking about running for office next year. Could I have your support? And he says, Jesse, whatever you need, man. I'll take good care of you.
Jesse will do great.
Which is so funny to think that that's the future governor of Minnesota and then the future president of the United States.
Oh, wow. No kidding.
Yeah. Danny, what about any other closing thoughts?
I'm just surprised that a Hulkamaniac like Donald Trump would support Jesse Ventura.
You think Donald Trump's a Hulkamaniac?
I mean, the Hulkster told us, brother.
Yeah. He is when he's backstroking and dog paddling backwards. Gentlemen, this was a lot of fun. We'll have to get in a little text chat and figure out a show that we all are high on that we can do again in a few weeks and rewatch, because right now with no live sports going, the people are really enjoying this. It's fun with the WWE Network now and like the availability of all this, because people can see, oh, we're going to talk about WrestleMania 4. They can go flip it on in the background, and watch it. 15 years ago, it was a little bit harder to find a lot of these shows. So, Jason, thanks a lot, buddy. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. Danny, I really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun. So start thinking about which one, some of your other favorites that we can link up on, even if it's not a Mania. Maybe we can do a SummerSlam or a Survivor Series or any other event, maybe a Rumble 92, maybe with Flair.
I was going to say SummerSlam 92 because I
love
the British one. I was going to watch that soon.
Sure, that'd be great. SummerSlam 92. I'm a Bret Hart fan. We get the first pay-per-view that was outside of the U.S. for the WWF. So maybe, Danny, what do you think? SummerSlam 92 is a future rewatch?
I'm good with anything WWF era up until Hogan's WCW exit. That's my prime time right there.
Okay, so let's circle that one maybe and plan for a few weeks from now.
Gino, can I give you one line from that SummerSlam?
Please do.
In the opening credits when they're doing they're interviewing fans, and there's like some little kid who goes, "The British Bulldog's gonna win, whether he wants to or not." And I'm like, what the hell? Why would he not want to win?
What does that mean? This is great. Yeah,
so the pay-per-view goes downhill after that.
Was going to carry him one way or the other.
Yeah. And we'll have a lot of fun to talk about that one because Davey Boy was inebriated throughout that match, which it ends up becoming just an incredible match anyway. So, okay, cool. Teaser. Let's start watching that one, and we'll talk about it again when we reconvene in a few weeks. Beamy, thank you very much, buddy. Let the folks know, where can we follow you online?
Beamy Awards or the Jason Beam Horse Racing Podcast.
And Danny K, you like to have some fun on Twitter every now and then. Where can we follow you?
Occasionally, if you want to get updates on my cats on a day-to-day basis, follow at Derby Danny X on Twitter.
Awesome.
Danny's a coward.
Yeah, he is.
Thank you very much, fellas. This was a blast. I look forward to talking SummerSlam 92 with you guys again in a few weeks. Let's take a quick break here on That's What G Said. Let's hear from one of our sponsors, but don't go anywhere. And a big thank you to Danny, and a big thank you to Jason Beem. We'll be back in a few weeks with them to talk SummerSlam 92. Big thank you to Mike Joyce. Hopefully we can keep talking about that last dance with Mike. He did a great job breaking down those first couple episodes of the documentary and giving us some other fun stories and insight from his time in Chicago as a Bulls fan during that crazy last dance era. Don't forget to subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. Share it around with your friends, anyone that's a fan of sports or any of the different topics, wrestling that we discuss, some of the shows that we recap. Always appreciate hearing back from you. We'll have another episode coming out in a few days where we kind of talk about what happened in round 1 of the NFL draft. We are going to go back in time and recap Wrestlemania 6 from 1990 with Darren and Andrew. We're going to give you some weekend horse racing. We're going to talk about the ruling that came out with the Red Sox today, which was absolutely bogus in baseball. So lots of different things to discuss on the next episode. Thanks again, folks, for tuning in. Here are the soothing sounds of Joey Cleveland with the That's What G Said theme song.